He's inciting violence currently alongside this happening in real time.
Right wingers committing same said violence in the name of
what?
Name them recently. Go ahead. Name them.
Steve. He's the political guy.
Let's hear it. Let's hear the right wing equivalents to the left wing.
I'm not going to defend that one.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I am Sarah the Raging Tomato, bringing to you live another Moderator Monday. This evening, I have with me Benjamin Balderson, Steve from AM Wake Up, Marte Reyes from On the Edge, and Rob Noir from Normal America with Rob Noir. The question of the evening is George Floyd worse for society than destiny? Benjamin, if you'd like to kick off with your opening statement, please.
Hello, everyone. I am Benjamin Balderson with the Deliberating Dog-Faced Dudes. I would like to thank Marte and Rob for agreeing to debate us tonight, and of course, the always amazing Sarah Tomato for hosting. Determining who is more detrimental for society breaks down into two areas: the person themselves and what their history of choices has been, and second, their effect on society. On a personal level, Destiny is surely degenerate as a person. He is a sexual deviant, possibly with legal repercussions, and even his close leftist friends have pushed away because his normally dangerous rhetoric has managed to increase in severity. Well, these are not great things in my book. They pale in comparison to the personal life of George Floyd, with armed robbery of a pregnant woman being a highlight. A lifetime of hard drugs, theft, and all kinds of fun. Second, we have the effect on society. Destiny certainly has a larger voice than the average person. He probably has a larger following than anyone here arguing tonight will achieve. He certainly uses that position to push a very unhinged and divisive rhetoric. I'm not sure how many people that reaches outside of his fan base and his most diligent opposition, though. I have never heard of anyone doing anything in the name of destiny besides file civil suits. And I've never heard him mentioned in an outside event such as the mass pew-pewer randomly mentioning Candace Owens. His rhetoric has gotten so divisive and unpopular, even his close leftist friends have been hard questioning it and denying his ideals, and have started distancing overall. Destiny, while being alive, will either continue down this self-destructive path or pivot and lose the people who follow just for that and the niche fame he has accrued for being so far unhinged. George Floyd, while not a powerful voice while alive, was elevated to martyrdom through propaganda. There is nothing that could come up in his history that would besmirch St. George at this point. Any attempt would make them dig in further with the religious fanaticism and zeal of your most outspoken orthobro. In his name, they have erected statues, painted murals, and most importantly, burned sections of major cities in his name. Masses of people have gathered and attacked police, robbed and looted businesses, and destroyed neighborhoods. The most destructive riot since the Rodney King incident, and that included the officers being found innocent. You cannot compare Destiny to this demigod of destruction and defilement. I do appreciate our opponents for offering up this near self-flagellation of a fight, and very much look forward to the indignation party at the dumpster fire after. This is going to be fun, guys.
Thank you, Benjamin. And Steve, to you.
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Sarah, for hosting. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Marte. It's nice to see you again. Happy to be here and looking forward to what comes of this. But, that we're even here debating whether Destiny or George Floyd is worse for society speaks to the sad nature of the lives of the terminally online. And I know this may be difficult for the ortho bro community to absorb or the lefty community to absorb, but there's much more to life than internet spats and attempt to go viral from the rhetorical stomping out of degens. It is vastly easier to tell a whore why she's a whore behind a screen than, for example, participating in your church organized post-riot cleanup of a burned out mom and pop store. For some, it's way easier than even opening a jar of olives. Now, there's nobody on the panel tonight that will argue against Destiny being just a crap human being. He's a degenerate. He funds his degenerate lifestyle by engaging in divisive rhetoric designed to elicit highly emotional responses, both in the affirmative and the negative, from an ever-shrinking audience. You guys are keeping his career alive. Destiny does share a trait, though, with George Floyd, in that they both got way too high on their own supply. The obvious difference is that Destiny's fame has faded over the years because of his overindulgence, whereas George Floyd's fame, influence, and martyrdom has increased posthumously. Social decay and societal collapse are measurable things that not even refined rhetoric can dance around. While there may be overlaps in some areas, George Floyd as a person, and even more so as a corpse, is immensely more reflective and representative of social decay and societal fragmentation leading to collapse that we're currently living through. Cursory examination of these characteristics will put to rest for anyone with a couple of brain cells left to rub together, and maybe we can end this debate early and open it up to the chat so that we can all pick on the degenerate lefties here to defend Destiny. Let's quickly, benchmarks for social decay include a decline in ethical cohesion and shared values, increased crime and poverty, breakdown of essential services and infrastructure. Fellas, what are we doing here? By every metric, George Floyd lived and took part in each and every aspect of these characteristics of social decay, and is currently the only person we're debating about whose death has increased the level of these metrics being prevalent in our society. We're talking about a person in George Floyd who was a career criminal. We're talking about a person who was engaged in drug sales and trafficking, participated in pornography, extortion, robbery, and assault, even in death. We've witnessed in his name justification for an estimated $100 million in property and infrastructure damage. We had the single largest post-riot insurance payout in recorded history to the tune of $1 billion. Mass arrest, mass injuries, handful of deaths. And the defining moment for racial and social division at the onset of this decade. There is that. Nihilistic grifters like Destiny certainly capitalized on the decline in social cohesion and shared values, but he simply can't be looked at as the lightning rod for this decline. The gentlemen making the argument tonight are effectively playing the role of Rachel Maddow or Amanda Seals when they go after Tucker Carlson, or their whatever online hooker is currently calling Andrew Wilson a stochastic terrorist. That's their job tonight, to be Amanda Seals. So again, just so we're clear, stochastic terrorism, broadly defined, as when a person of influence uses his or her rhetoric to increase the likelihood of violence. But hey, since Destiny and Captain Olive Jar are buddies, this all does track. It does.
Thank you, Steve. Marte, to you, please.
The Ozempic God of War basically handed me half of my argument here. The thing that I want to point out, though, that Balderman was saying, he was saying a lot of great highlights from George Floyd. They made statues and great monuments and things like this. I don't see how this is negative, because we have George Droid memes and all this other stuff with culture. George has actually made a lot of good in society. Federal and state laws have changed, actually. The George Floyd Justice Policing Act was introduced in 2020, aimed to ban chokeholds and all this other stuff. No-knock warrants, I can go on. Convictions, oversight. Chauvin was convicted, right? But now they're reflecting on the oversight of New York and Los Angeles, thus changing law enforcement for the better. So these changes made policy more transparent, reducing impunity for excessive force. How can this be bad for society? Corporate and education responses. Over 1,000 companies like Nike pledged $2 billion for racial equality initiatives as well. Media and cultural shifts that happened that were actually good. 300% increase of streams, which benefited Balderson. I appreciate the spirited debate and beginning of the intro from Wayne's World and Company, the reunion over here. But let's move on. The heightened awareness is normalized conversations and privilege and bias, right? So this has helped a lot for tolerance with racism and everything else. Mental health funding has increased. Community-led initiatives, health outcomes with the CDC, as far as Fent. George Fent is now a meme. That's awesome. How can this be bad for society? There's so much good right now when we can talk about the aftermath. There's also diversity, leadership. I can go on with all these metrics, but here's the thing, though. When we talk about whether or not George Floyd was good or bad, I would say in short, George Floyd's murder did not cause the riots in a direct, I would say, antagonistic sense. It exposed and accelerated a boiling frustration in America. So blaming or crediting him for personally doing this oversimplifies a broader societal reckoning. He was a patsy at best. I've heard several people saying this, something to point to at an already boiling American society full of racial tension. People look for a mascot to place blame in. How can this not be the case for him? And accountability is a catalyst. Now moving on to Destiny. I don't see how he's good for society, because I can argue for how George Floyd was good. George Floyd, my bad. I keep saying that. Destiny was way worse for society. His ongoing actions, including inciting fear and violence, harassing critics, and amplifying toxic debates. Let's get to the real stuff. That's why we're here. I'll wrap this up real quick. He called for white redneck militias to mow down dipshit protesters. This is literally what he said. He also escalated this by saying, I've moved full to the political violence level. Literally said this. And with the Charlie Kirk offing on Piers Morgan with Andrew Wilson, he refused to condemn the murder. How is this not influencing a massive amount of society through Reddit forums and everything else? He's basically said, you need conservatives to be afraid of getting killed when they go to events, so that way they look to leadership to turn down the temperature. I've seen the Reddit forums. I don't think you guys have seen this. It's literally people mirroring what he's saying. He added, if you wanted Charlie Kirk to be alive, Donald Trump shouldn't have been president for a second term. How is this not inciting violence? He also led to a Twitch ban for hateful conduct, including promoting violence. Elon Musk, matter of fact, because you're saying that it's such an isolated incident with Destiny, Elon Musk petitioned for him to go to jail. He's that bad, right? This is a massive appeal. In other instances, wrapping this up real quick, Destiny has repeatedly called for the, I would say, offing and self-deletion of specific individuals, at least half a dozen by name, threatened streamers with, I would say, implied physical violence, who supported hypothetical violence against physical leaders like Brian Thompson that also backed Trump, or if they back Trump's. So I'm going to wrap this up by just saying, I don't see how you can say that Destiny is least worse than George Floyd when he was a passive bad, right? A passive bad, when Destiny is a active bad to society that continues this rhetoric right now as we speak. I'll concede my time and give it to my partner, Rob Norm.
Perfect. Thank you, Marte. And Rob, to you.
Well, I would be belied if I allowed someone to thank Sarah more than me here to get suck-up points early on. So, Sarah, thank you so much, as always, for hosting this debate. My two opponents, who I've never interacted with to my knowledge, we have Benjamin Balderson, who looks like a failed extra from that show Vikings, which isn't all that much of an insult. And then, Steve, I'd make some comment about your looks, but I can't see you with that big black dick of a mic in front of your face there, so I can't really, see exactly what your face looks like. But nonetheless, I'm no looker myself, so what do I have to say about any of this? I'm looking forward to this. I think it'll be a fun debate. The topic's a little silly, but I actually think there are serious implications here. Now, the specific wording of the topic, I think, is where our opponents are going to lose the debate. The specific wording is George Floyd worse for society than Destiny? Now, the implication here is, I think Balderson gets to the heart of this, that you could look at it in two different ways. One is who they were as people, as far as the direct actions they're taking. And second is the overall effects they have on society. I think that, though, the way Balderson's looking at this, I'm not even going to get into a lot of the sexual dalliances and allegations against Destiny unless it really comes up. I'm looking at more of what he symbolizes and the effect he has on sort of our political discourse going forward as a country. And I think that's much worse than what George Floyd did. George Floyd can't be blamed for how people used his death and then used it to justify bad behavior afterwards. But people that are listening to Destiny and going out and doing things, or listening to people like Destiny and going out and do bad things, I think we can put that at the feet. Let me give you an example of how. I'll ask Balderson this when we start the open panel, or maybe this is the first question that he would like to answer. Ben Carson's a black man. If he was killed brutally by a police officer and a bunch of black people decided to riot for 3 months, would you say that Ben Carson was a horrible person? Even though he didn't live a life of being horrid. In fact, he was a neurosurgeon, seemed to, by all accounts, be a very good Christian man who did a lot to help as a community, I think he would say no. And yet, if we said, but people did bad things in his name because they looked at the footage and did bad things, we wouldn't say that that meant that he was responsible, Ben Carson. Similarly, I don't think you could say George Floyd himself is responsible for all of the negative actions people took after his death. You certainly could blame George Floyd for the way that he died, robbing a store, overdosing on fentanyl, not complying with police, etc. You certainly could blame him for all the heinous actions he took in real life. But at the end of the day, this is a run-of-the-mill scumbag. The idea of billions of dollars of damage, hundreds of people hurt, dozens killed in the George Floyd riots, these are riots that would have occurred with any number of black people anytime there's an excuse that there's a police interaction. You could see it with Trayvon Martin, that wasn't even a police interaction, or the Hands Up Don't Shoot live Michael Brown in Ferguson. So I don't see how you could lay that. And if it's just going to be the societal impacts versus, George Floyd was a shitty guy. Sure, George Floyd's a shitty guy, just like a dozen other people you could throw a rock at and hit anytime that you're crossing the liquor store in an inner city and finding people that are sitting outside drinking 40s. Destiny is no slouch in the being a shitty person himself on actions that he's alleged to have done, but I'm more interested in what the societal impact of these things are. We'll talk specifically about the societal impacts of Destiny himself, but more importantly, people like him and what they represent. We live in a world now where increasingly, particularly Democrats, are thinking violence is more and more a solution to their problems, even if they won't directly doing it, that they wink and nod and cheer on violence. Destiny said on Piers Morgan the other day, a fundamental truth, I think, which is with the Democratic Party now, that they want Republicans to fear for their lives to go into public. And that's absolutely true. And people like Destiny represent a key voice in that occurring. Let's not pretend that Destiny is not someone without clout. He is someone that was interviewing several members of people that were vying for control of the DNC apparatus itself. He's talked to Congress people. He's one of the most influential, probably number 2 when it comes to streamers, influential with the liberal or Democratic Party. And so this is someone that's hugely influential. We can see increasingly political violence from people that are malaligned, particularly young people that are going to make up a large, substantial portion of Destiny's audience. You need only go to his Reddit and see what his followers are saying if you think what he's saying is violent. I'll remind you, in addition to the comment I already said, he said that he was ready to off, in as blatant terms as possible, Republicans. He also said that the worst thing that could have happened was that bullet not taking out Donald Trump. Now we live in a society where 55% of Democrats say they could somewhat justify the murder of Donald Trump. The issue of our time that we see going on right now is rabid left-wing rhetoric, which is leading people to think that they are morally justified in using violence against their opponents, who they consider followers of that Austrian painter. And as long as they smear you as that and say that it's always justified, that will be far worse than anything George Floyd ever did in his personal life, and even will have a lasting legacy worse than the Floyd riots. Last thing I'll say is this. I'm more than happy to talk about how Destiny directly leads to the upgrading in this tension, but I think more importantly, there is a question to be had here of what's worse off for society in general. Someone that George Floyd represents, a career criminal that did really shitty things, or someone that Destiny represents, a person with a large following and voice that's putting out harmful political rhetoric that's justifying violence. And I think that it is easy to see, as bad as we could say career criminals are, what Destiny represents is by far more damaging to our society.
Perfect. Thank you, Rob. And for the record, I only accept suck-up points via donation, super chat, cash. Thank you, gentlemen. And as a kind reminder to our audience, we're going to get through our debate, then we will move into closing statements. Then we will read and respond to your kind super chats. And of course, our favorite part, we will move into open panel dumpster fire per usual. Gentlemen, I leave the floor open to you.
Balderson, would you like to answer that question about Ben Carson?
I would. This is why it was divided into 2 sections, because oftentimes the person that a movement is started behind doesn't necessarily, the ideals don't match the movement. This happens historically over and over again. So this is why I said while we're determining this, we look at 2 factors. Their actual person and personal life and the choices they made, and then the movement that spawned. Now, in George Floyd's case, the movement is bad and his personal life was bad. Now, what I would like to ask you is, who has ever done anything in the name of Destiny besides play video games and make bad videos And I would like to ask Marte why Fenny Floyd isn't what you call him, and you keep using this roid word. I don't know. Is it a roid a thing with you? I don't understand.
All right,
No, it's George Droid, just to clear this up. I mean, I know that you're using a steroid reference. So, but anybody could see this clearly that, George, when he passed, there was a huge swath of memes that happened that I mean, I'd hate to say that I thoroughly enjoy kind of, and I bet you do too. When you see this, you're kind of humored by this. But here's the thing though, let's get this straight. When he did pass, we could say that this is very passive as far as the violence, right? And he didn't put his name on this. He wasn't even here to put his name on this. And like Rob mentioned before, Destiny is actively doing this. He's an active version of, I would say, verbal and political violence. Matter of fact, we have numerous amounts of NGOs that fund these people. And by the way, this is the Democratic Party, which I know both of you don't support at all. But if he's inciting all this violence and George Droid is not with us anymore, I don't even see what you could even use as an argument right now, because his whole response, what I was saying with the question about Ben Carson, it's really true. It rings true because you haven't really even reconciled this. And I've yet to hear reconciliation of like how you can even map this onto anything else, because if it could have just been another black person that died in society and this would have happened and they would have made it the George Stevens riot or the Bob Wilson riot, this would have been anything else. And this movement wasn't his movement. People just made him a patsy. That's what it was.
And if I could just piggyback on that, real quick, and then I promise, Steve, I'll let you go. If you look at the wording of this topic, is George Floyd worse for society than Destiny? Not, are the actions took in the name of George Floyd worse than the actions people took in the name of Destiny? I concede your point, Balderson, that there's multiple ways we could look at this, both who they were as individuals and what it meant to society. But it's not just what their legacy meant to society, it's what we would hold them responsible for leading to society. And in this situation, if you concede the Ben Carson point, it's not that George Floyd went out there and said, I want everyone to riot if I die, blah, blah, blah. He didn't say that. People took upon his death because there was a unique circumstance where, one, you had that the Democrats wanted people to riot because we were going into an election season. And if you have everyone with one of these, right, inevitably someone's going to be able to film an interaction with police and a black man that they don't want. So right place, right time. But with Destiny, we could actually see that the rhetoric he's using is rhetoric that's being used by people committing violence now. And so you can't argue that George Floyd himself was bad for society. You could say that his death and the excuse that people used for that was bad for society. But again, you've already conceded the point. If this would have happened to a good man who happened to be black like Ben Carson, you wouldn't be sitting here. I'll ask you point blank. If the topic was, if that was Ben Carson that died that way, and we had similar riots, and the topic was, is Ben Carson worse for society than Destiny? What would your argument have been? Yes, because of the riots? You would have said, no, it's not Ben Carson's fault.
Do you want to take a swing at this nonsense, Ben, or?
I was waiting for your turn. I'll get it after you.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, this is if, my aunt had balls, she'd be my uncle type of argument. And that's okay. It's what I would expect from Rachel Madcow and Simone Van Jones. I would expect that. It's par for the course when your only point of view, the only way you can attack this argument is from a place of feelings and from a place of words scare me and I don't like them. And there's words that we have to get rid of. And the same kind of conversation that we had earlier before we went live. If you guys get your way with this, we're going to be having over and over and over, because when the argument comes from an emotional place, especially when you're making the exact same leftist argument that I always hear from, the mad cows of the world, or, any of these clowns. I think I said Amanda Seals earlier. When it's from there, there's no satisfaction ever. There's never enough. Now, if the idea is, hang on. If the idea is that what Destiny represents is worse to society, then we can definitely argue what George Floyd represents, and the amount of damage and the amount of bodies and the amount of incarceration and the amount of destroyed neighborhoods that represents. So either way, you're going to lose. Ben, did you want to add to that at all?
I was wondering which martyr exactly went into it wanting to be a martyr historically. because that's what you're expecting. That's what you're trying to
Russell
transfer
Brand.
over Russell Brand. Yes,
He hasn't got to the conclusion yet.
Jesus
he
Christ.
didn't. Somebody take care of it.
Jesus Christ was a martyr that went into it expecting it.
Well, outside of
There's others like Joan of Arc.
We had St. Ignatius talking to a pit of lions and get massacred. He knew it was going to happen.
Joan of Arc did not expect to be murdered. I would give you.
She knew she was going to be put
in the Christian fan fiction tale. I would give you that. Yes, he believed he was going to be a martyr.
How about maybe something a little more down to your size? Braveheart? Does that fit your Scottish looking ass?
William Wallace?
Movie,
yeah,
that was not well done.
It's a great movie. Now you're really blaspheming.
Historically, really bad historically.
Okay, you're right. I mean the character in the movie. Like Steve, I don't know what to say. Like, it brings to mind that scheme from Billy Madison. Your insane ramblings have made us all dumber. I award you 0 points. What the fuck are you talking about? We're talking about something quite specific.
Can you have your own personality?
Yes.
Does it have to just be bad movie quotes?
No, that's part of my
even
personality.
The non-funny guy next to you is desperately trying.
Can you have your own personality? Is there just a phallic black dick in your face so that we can't see it? Either way, I guess we're still going to be making the arguments, right?
Dude,
I guess. Oh,
Bring
wow.
it back around, boys. Bring it back around.
Sounds a little like you're upset like a lefty
it's
here.
On your mind.
Anyways,
the
point
that
I'm trying to make is what you said was insane rambling that meant nothing, right? We're making clear points that have nothing to do with left-wing points. We're merely saying an argument that you can't deal with, that if we're asking who we fault for negative actions, we wouldn't say people taking actions on behalf of someone who never advocated those actions are responsible. If Ben Carson was in the same situation and he died in the same way and riots sprung up, would you say that Ben Carson was worse than Destiny? You all can't answer. Instead, you ramble on about, like, this is the same as Rachel Maddow. You haven't given one distinction as how that's... Explain how Rachel Maddow makes that argument.
I would say that in the William Wallace movie, in the Braveheart movie, where they all charged, yeah, that was on William Wallace. It was inspired by William Wallace. In this case, a good thing. And so, yes, inspired by William Wallace. Well, I'm still waiting for you, though, to answer my original question to you, Rob, where who is Destiny inspired to go do horrible things outside of the people that he gets to touch his pee-pee or he touches theirs, or whatever that
we don't know specifically. For example, if someone went out and took a specific negative action, they might not say, I did this because Destiny told me to. We know that he's adhering to a conversation that is getting people to do these sorts of things, though. For example, the person that killed Charlie Kirk was probably someone that's listening to the same types of rhetoric that Destiny's espousing, that his opponents are fascist, that Trump has declared himself God King because the Supreme Court said that he's beyond reproach, that we need to do everything possible, that Republicans should fear for their lives, that Republicans could be offed because of these things. That's the type of rhetoric that the person that writes on a bullet, catch this fascist, and then takes out someone like Charlie Kirk would be espousing. That's at least a better connection than George Floyd happened to die, and then people use that as an excuse to go take terrible actions.
I do have a question.
Any statues to Destiny or murals or
Alderson,
signs? Or has there been one riot?
One riot that you're fighting right now. Those are good things. Murals, police reform, all the good that's happened with education, racial equity that happened after him. I can name a bunch of good things for George Floyd to happen.
But you're lying about all of them, and everybody knows it.
I can't name anything sarcasm. Is espousing nothing. Can you name one thing that's good?
That's not the debate.
The debate is societally affecting it, good or bad. That is the debate. What are you talking about?
Worse.
If we're gonna go from your point of view, sure, dude. If we're gonna do the sarcastic, I don't have an answer for this.
We have to create a kind of distinction because I don't
do the exact same rant.
Did he utter anything that was charging violence to speech or through speech or any other metric? Did George Floyd ever utter this on a societal level by his mouth? Did he ever spark racial tension by his mouth or any of this?
We're talking about what both of them represent. That's the argument that you guys presented.
Correct.
Right?
And this is my beginning.
Yes,
because
if we're going to do that, then yes,
Destiny
George Floyd
active.
is inherently responsible for vastly more violence that's actually taken place in his own life by the way he lived. and what that lifestyle represents. There is a
As opposed
massively
to
higher
maybe.
body count to drug dealer, human fucking trafficker, porn actor, fucking assault and battery, armed robbery. All of my homies got bodies on them.
Steve, can you tell me how it couldn't have been another black man if it wasn't him?
That's
Can
not
you
the
tell me that
argument.
they would
That's
have
not
been
the debate.
another
The
patsy
debate's about
besides
George
him?
Floyd. So yeah, if we're
How would this not have been another patsy?
Okay, so
Would
there's
you
a
like
patsy
us to
here.
call it-
Hang
would you
on.
like us to
There's a
change the name
patsy
to
here, but
Toby or
there's not a
something?
patsy
Hold on,
in
you're both
Orem, Utah.
talking.
We
No,
have to
I think
believe
there's-
no wait. No, the argument he's making is that we have to believe the official narrative about one thing, but if George Floyd is being used as a patsy, then we can't believe the official narrative about what happened about George Floyd. Like, I don't really understand.
If
like,
I could
how
try to
you're
clear, if I
arguing
could
with
try to clear it up, I think there's two separate arguments going on here, right? The first is the argument that I'm making with this Ben Carson point, which is if we're looking at the damage that occurred post George Floyd's death and we're putting that on George Floyd, Marte is saying that seems to be erroneous because George Floyd never advocated doing any of that stuff, and it could have been any other black man like Ben Carson. And you guys seem to have conceded you wouldn't say Ben Carson is worse for society than Destiny,
Ben
even if
Carson
he
is
would
an
have been.
exceptional human being. He's not every other man. Period. Black, white, whatever.
Wait,
He's an exception. Is Cuba Gooding Jr. going to play you in a movie? Is he going to play you, Marte?
Probably not. What's that have anything to do with that?
Wait, what does this have to do with the point, Steve?
Like, that was before his presidential run. What I'm saying is your example is based on skin color, not on what type of person they were.
No, that's
right?
because
So
that's
you're
because okay, that's because
And
the
that's what makes it
actions that
nonsensical.
people
You're like, this exceptional human
Hold-
being. If people
hold
did
on.
this, how does that even, why would you even bother? It's
Go-
totally nonsensical.
Go ahead, Rob.
because the justification that people gave for the mass amounts of riots and stuff that we saw was because a white police officer killed a black man. People weren't rioting because they were like, we're rioting because George Floyd stuck a gun in a pregnant girlfriend's stomach. That's not why they were rioting. They weren't rioting because George Floyd tried to pass fake money. They weren't rioting because George Floyd did fentanyl. They were rioting because the narrative was here was a black man that was abused and killed by police. That's why they were rioting. And so the point is, that's not George Floyd, that because people took that narrative. In fact, you would blame people like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson that drummed up these sort of racial tensions year after year after year for the riots more than you would blame the individual George Floyd. The same with Michael Brown, the same with Trayvon Martin. And my point is, if it would have been Ben Carson or a person like Ben Carson, who was a good moral black man, who was killed by a police officer and then people rioted, would you say that person's worse than Destiny because you're blaming them for all the riots? I would just like a straight answer to that question from either of you.
I didn't ever concede that point. I explained how there's a division between a personal life and the effect that they had on a society, and that the two don't have to match. That
He also referred to
if
it as a
Ben
giant
Carson-
propaganda
if
operation. which
if
it
there
was.
was horrifying riots in Ben Carson's name, his effect on society would still be bad, even if Ben Carson in and of himself was a good man and only took good action.
And so then you would defend the prompt saying that in that world, that Ben Carson was worse for society than Destiny.
I would say that he had a worse effect on society.
I don't think so. I think
What?
that the words don't match up with what you're saying. He had a worse effect. That puts some blame on him. But we would both agree that none of the blame would be on Ben Carson.
No, your reaction to me is your reaction still. That's do
Do you agree
blame
that the
other
moment
people
you're
for
dead,
your
you have no
emotions
say
or
so in
something?
what your legacy is
Pretty much, sure.
and how you're remembered?
Yeah.
Then 20, 30 years down the road, it is just as likely as your hypothetical that Ben Carson would be remembered more negatively than positive.
True. So, given what you know about Ben Carson, would you say that he's worse for society than Destiny if people change the meaning of what his life was about?
You, from that point of view, you would have to say yes. he
I
be
would
worse
say
for
no.
society.
I would say that no. That's
Yeah.
not what we would do, right? I think that it's outlandish. The other point, though, that I think there were two ships passing. We were talking about two arguments. You, Steve, then seemed to make a different argument, which is the representation of what the individual's life meant, right? And so you're saying, look, if we look at what a drug dealer, a assaulter of women, someone like George Floyd, that type of person, those type of actions is worse for society than what Destiny's representing. Is that fair? That's sort of the argument you're making here?
Yeah, that's definitely the point.
Okay.
Yeah.
My argument to that is, well, that's sort of concede. It doesn't concede, but it doesn't argue the first point of this as the individual's destiny in George Floyd. But even if we accept that we're just saying the stereotypical drug dealing shithead guy that beats his girlfriend, et cetera, versus the stereotypical bloviating large audience lefty that's out there at least giving dog whistles to violence. I think even in that world, certainly what Destiny's doing is going to be far worse for society merely from the fact that he has such a bigger reach. The truth is there are millions of people like George Floyd. And so one individual, while they may be a shithead and they may have the ability to influence a direct person, such as the woman who had the gun pointed at her pregnant belly's life worse, he's not going to have a massive reach. The guy that's beating the shit out of his wife is a fucking terrible dredge of a human, but at the end of the day, he's beating his wife, and his effect is going to be on a smaller circle of people than, say, a corrupt politician, for example, that's negatively affecting millions of people. So which one would be worse for society? Well, we would say even though the individual that beats his wife, that might be an individually more heinous action, what would be worse for society was the person making terrible decisions that were worse off for the whole of society. In that sense, Destiny's way worse in that sense as well.
You already conceded, though, that there's, well, tens of millions of George Floyds out there.
Okay.
Right? That's your point. Yeah, the interchangeable black dude, right?
No, it's not just black dudes. I'd say drug addicts, people that
that's
abuse.
What you said, because the argument about Ben Carson was based on skin color. So interchangeable black dude.
Do you understand why I made that point, though? The riots were because he was black.
Yeah,
correct?
No,
we
I
all agree
understand
with
how
that?
rhetorical traps work. I still think it's nonsense.
It's not a rhetorical trap.
That's not the point. The point, though, is if it's interchangeable black guy, and there's tens of millions of them, then that is a much larger impact societally than the dwindling audience that Destiny has.
Well, that's admitting that it's not an individual. You're saying that
rooted problem in society. Currently.
You're saying it's not an individual. This is a bunch of other people. Now this changes the whole argument. You're saying that this is a massive population, not one person's influence on society.
I'm responding to your arguments.
No, we never made that argument.
No, you made the argument that you could interchange anybody, and I don't disagree with that part. Again, a martyr doesn't control the movement after the martyr.
No, Rob's never said that. What are you talking about?
He literally did. That's the whole thing. And
he didn't say he was interchangeable. He used an example of a person, right? Because we understand that this was racially motivated by other people. Ben Carson wouldn't make it racially motivated. George Floyd wouldn't do this. It was happenstance because this is a powder keg that was waiting to happen. This could have been any black person. That's what Rob is saying. This could have been anybody. This isn't saying, oh, let me just put in black person. This was something that he's talking about that was racially motivated by a situation. He's using an example. That's what he's saying.
Right. For example, let me say Tony Timpa was a...
But
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve. I didn't mean... I'm sorry.
No, I mean, according to the police report, everybody had already had prior contact with each other. So it's not, it
wouldn't matter.
As random.
I don't think it would have mattered. So again, the reason that I'm talking about interchanging a black person dying there is because I assumed that it sounded like Balderson was making the argument that there's two ways to look at this. The heinous individual actions in the real world that these people took, and then what happened as a result of what these people existing were. Now, I'm arguing against Balderson saying, but look, we don't blame George Floyd that post his death where he had no control, people took a bunch of heinous actions. We wouldn't blame him, just like if it was Ben Carson. The reason I used Ben Carson was because it is undoubtable that the justification for the riots was a cop kills a black man. So I was merely pointing out a black man that I thought we could all agree wouldn't fall into the same category as George Floyd. You're trying to impugn me that I'm making some racial point here. I'm not. I'm literally just trying as best as possible to have an apples to apples comparison by choosing someone that I thought it wouldn't be a matter of contention that we would all agree is someone we wouldn't blame like that. I'm shocked to hear that you guys are seeming to say that you would still blame them. But to your point, Steve, about the interchangeability, right? You're right. Let's just say that there are millions of people, using your words, millions of interchangeable people to commit these crimes, violence against pregnant girlfriends, drug addicts, et cetera, et cetera. So then the question should be reworded as such. If we removed George Floyd and we removed Destiny and neither of them ever existed, where would society be better off? Well, with George Floyd, he's one of millions. And with Destiny, he's what, one of a dozen? So wouldn't it mean that Destiny has more of a negative effect if there's a million other people that are doing what George Floyd's doing?
Are there millions of Destiny followers doing the exact same thing, like criminality-wise?
Well,
are there millions of them? Are there 10 of them? Are there 6 of them?
That's changing the question.
No. I mean, it's the same comparison.
It's not. What you're comparing. What you're comparing.
Your wording of the way that you
the
said.
way that you're talking about it is destiny inspires people to go do gay crimes or something like that, right?
I didn't say that
like
necessarily.
That's effectively, Destiny's words, his rhetoric, inspire people to go out and commit violence.
I didn't say that directly. I said that could be a case. I said what I said was that people
stochastic terrorism argument.
That's part of it, but there's more than that. For example, Steve, are you a fan of gay marriage?
Not particularly.
Okay, well, I just don't know. Would you consider yourself a conservative? Like, just give me a quick rundown of where you're at politically.
No. I think those isms are absolutely are slurred.
Isms. Okay.
Yeah.
Now who sounds like Rachel Maddow?
Yeah, no. She probably wouldn't put it that way, but yeah, no. I think conservatism is very.
Who'd you vote for in 2024?
Oh, I do not participate in rituals for bloodline PDF.
Of course.
I could have guessed. I could have guessed that you're a complainer who doesn't vote. Okay, who'd you vote for in local elections? What party are you more likely to vote for?
The last person I voted for president was the Libertarian candidate in 1996.
All right. Not Libertarian in 96. I don't know who that would have been. You didn't vote for Perot?
No.
Come on. You can vote for Perot. Anyways, I was too young to vote back then. Nonetheless, the point is...
Perot was like prophetic.
Yeah, I like Perot.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it's fantastic. But yeah, no, I saw what they were doing to it.
I don't have to make just a stochastic terrorism claim of destiny. I don't need to make that. I could say that people that share Destiny's political ideology, even if they aren't engaging in acts of violence, are worse off for society. For example, people that want open borders, people that want to legitimize a lot of the LGBT shit that's indoctrinated to our children, people that want sort of more socialized policies. I could say that people that want to adhere more to giving more money to Israel. I could say all of that. None of that's a crime, but all of it would still be more negative to society than an interchangeable felon that does what millions of other people in this country do.
So I want to speak first to your assertion that I'm blaming the person for the movement that follows. That absolutely is not the fact. You cannot hold the person to blame for something they had no specific control over. That doesn't mean that the societal impact isn't what it is, right? And Destiny is one of 1,000 Democrat mouthpieces that are forming this rhetoric. And when you're saying that type of rhetoric, if you're saying that translates into action, all the right-wing speakers that as soon as the recent Charlie Kirk incident happened, I don't disagree. The left wing, especially Destiny, the things he said were horrifyingly offensive. They were like, are you even a person, dude? But the right wing then said, this is war. If we're going to take everything that everybody said at their word, what does war include? I've served in the military. I remember what they taught me about it and what they trained me for when war comes. So if we're going to say that the rhetoric that they are giving out to any effect, because you haven't in any substantive way proved that anybody's done anything in the name of Destiny besides drop their pants and sit down on a chair, that unless you can prove that, I'm not sure how words aren't just words. And if they are more than words, why doesn't that apply to the right?
Okay, so first off, when I say blaming, I'm not saying whether or not you blamed. I said in order to win the prompt, is George Floyd worse for society than Destiny? You would have to prove that George Floyd, the actions he took are worse, not what people did in his name. Similarly, we would not say Ben Carson is worse for society than Destiny if a bunch of people erroneously went out based on footage they saw of his death and decided to riot. You wouldn't say that Ben Carson was worse for society than Destiny. You could say people that misinterpreted the life of Ben Carson were bad, but that he himself was not worse for society. That's the point I'm making there when I say with the blaming. Secondly, when you talk about this false dichotomy, when I look at it, this both sides do it argument, I find it to be one of the most intellectually devoid arguments that I hear. The violence is overwhelmingly coming from the left, and it's shameful that people even try to both sides this argument. Nonetheless, if we're going to accept that and say, well, because we see overwhelming amounts of violence directed at right-wing right-wingers from left-wingers, including them mocking and laughing by the tens of thousands the murder of Charlie Kirk in front of us all. When they say, well, prepare for war and things like that, that means they're equally to blame as Destiny. Well, a couple things wrong with this. One, I thank you for your service very much. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I know we're having fun arguing with each other, but I do truly mean that. But one, just saying prepare for war doesn't necessarily mean an act of violence. For example, we say prepare to fight, things like that. That doesn't mean that we're talking specifically about physical violence. A lot of the people talking about this are talking about, like, we need to balkanize. We need to understand that people are going to use violence against us, and you should be prepared to defend yourself. I myself condemn all forms of political violence unequivocally, including those actions on the right. But second, even if we did say that this was somehow negative, it's in response to what we see from the left. And fine, so what? You blame those people as well. Few of them will individually have the reach of Destiny, although there are some that would have the reach of Destiny, if not bigger. What we're talking about specifically is Destiny vis-a-vis George Floyd, a person who you've already conceded that would be interchangeable with millions of other people based on the criminal actions that he took. And so if we're talking specifically about the exact inflammatory rhetoric that Destiny uses, it has to be near the very top when it comes to people that have a massive reach. And I'd like to ask Steve, he keeps talking about Destiny's dwindling audience. What do you think his audience is now? How many live viewers does he have now? Do you have any clue?
How many are we counting the gamer
before
streams?
you answer, I wanted to just sum that up. That was like the auctioneer version of, yeah, but theirs is worse and I like it less. So it's a problem.
That's not true. We could talk about that. I'd be happy to debate you on this specific subject.
I want to answer your question. Are we talking about the gamer years or the political debate starting years for how long Destiny's been doing it? Because I did look it up before we came here tonight.
Well, I don't know. In general, what was his peak versus what it is now? How about that?
Oh, yeah. More and now less.
But how much?
I don't. By several 100,000. He's dropped off quite a bit.
Based on what metrics? Like total views on each YouTube video?
Or any other platform that he's allowed on.
Well, yeah. I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the bulk of Destiny's influence would be the live viewers that he has. And he still routinely has over tens of thousands of live viewers on his videos. And that's with diversifying, like he's partly on Kick, he's partly on YouTube.
That's also, how many people are hate watching, how many of them are bots, so that's okay. Yeah, sure. There's kind of an argument to be made there, but then you'd have to turn that into proof of influence, and that doesn't exist.
I think that
how is live viewers more influential than overall viewers, except for that you get super chats during the live, but how is the person interacting live getting somehow more out of it than the person that watched it at 3 a.m. or whenever the fuck.
A live viewer is someone that's tended to be more supportive or more interested in what you say than someone that's just catching it casually on a short form video or a video that happens afterwards. I think even Sarah would be able to speak to that. Me as a streamer, I could speak to that myself. For example, my influence has gone up. I'm very small, but my influence is going up precipitously. And yeah, if you look at my videos, I am only like 2,000 people that'll watch a short form video of me. A lot of people have these huge million view videos. What it is people watch 30 to 45 seconds of it. The live stream viewers tend to stay there longer. I only bring it up because he was talking about a dwindling audience as if Destiny is only talking to a paltry amount of people now. And it couldn't be further from the truth.
I was curious how you were quantifying that, because in my opinion, if you ever watched chats on half of these videos, they aren't even listening to you. Not you personally.
Sure.
I'm making
you bastard!
Just for clarity purposes, I mean, there are vast differences between a live streamer and a vlogger, a video uploader type of person.
Yeah.
And the chat, yes, the chat usually is entertaining itself, and half the time they're not even paying attention. But that's their social circle. You know what I mean? So I think there are two very big differences between that and what happens during and after a video is live, and then post production send outs and how that operates too. So there are a lot of
the reason I bring this up is because I could be wrong. By no means am I a prolific Destiny watcher, but doesn't he put most of his videos, he unlists them after he live streams them now, right? I don't think that was always the case. and he's streaming in other platforms as his primary source, such as Kick, which is a little different. But the point, like, to answer the other point here about show his influence, I don't think that Destiny's words have ever been more far-reaching. When Marte already said it, you literally have people like the Vice President of the United States talking about him. You have people like Elon Musk. You have him on mainstream platforms like Piers Morgan saying this shit. You have him talking to Democrat members of Congress, people that are vying for the leadership of the DNC. And so I think it's erroneous to be like, oh, the way that Steve's sort of saying it's like, well, Destiny's this has-been that used to have a big reach and now it's dwindling. I don't think that can be further from the truth.
Now he's a lolcow.
He represents the Democrats
it's
quite
very
well.
similar to the way Alex Stein came up, where he made such a crazy asshole out of himself. I mean, don't get me wrong, that Putin put a bullet in Putin's brain song that he was singing at city council meetings dressed up as a crazed leftist. Hilarious. But he went and made an asshole out of himself. And then the way he actually got fame was then the right wing started posting his videos as, look at this crazy leftist. And he wasn't even a leftist. And then it was really a troll on both sides. Next thing you know, he's got a right wing job. It's the same thing going on with
Marte, real quick. Name me the bigger left wing.
How many people are watching him just to see the train wreck?
Okay, name me a more influential left wing streamer than Destiny. Hassan, then go next.
I don't follow left wing.
Right,
streamers.
you can't name one because Destiny.
Ask Steve on this one. Ask Steve.
Sure,
I'm not
go
the guy.
for it, Steve.
Well, okay, so I would say that Crystal Ball probably has more influence than Destiny.
It'd be close. Let's say I say that it's close, okay?
You know, and you said name one, so I named one.
Okay.
After Hassan, which you already conceded. So that puts Destiny.
Wouldn't Rachel Maddow count?
Well, she's not a streamer, and I don't even think she has the influence or reach of Destiny at this point. MSNBC's in the shitter. Right, but the point is,
I mean,
and even if
Rachel Maddow's little Barbie Ken doll, Kyle,
how about
what's
that
his
Pac-Man
name?
kid?
The
What about
blonde
that
dude
kid?
now? He has an equal, if not greater, audience. Kyle Kalinske.
okay,
Than Destiny.
okay, now that's fine.
You know,
Let's take that. So here's the ones we have.
The
Crystal
Young
Ball
Turks have a larger audience than Destiny.
Crystal Ball.
I mean, it's we could still go. Like what I'm saying is, he's not as influential as you guys are claiming, and the only people that are keeping his name in the public's mouth are the Ortho Bros and Piers Morgan.
Okay,
like
real quick.
The only
Go
people
ahead,
I ever hear talking about him.
The idea that Destiny's just a lol, Kyle. Let's look at the people you said. We'll set Crystal Ball aside from now. Kyle Kalinske, Hassan, right? Like, those people are lol cows. Hassan's one of the only people that has calls to violence more routinely than Destiny. This is representative of the average Democrat at this point, of the people that are out there and have voices in this party. That's Destiny's not a lol cow. He is a good representation. 55% of Democrats polled said they could somewhat justify the murder of Donald Trump. Right? Like, this isn't some fringe radical group. Destiny's just a lol cow. No, he is representing. There are millions of Democrats that agree with Destiny. Republicans must tone down the rhetoric first. They are followers of the ideology that evil Austrian painter was. That's who they are. They should fear for their lives to be in public. These aren't fringe beliefs. And Destiny's in the top 5 most influential of streamers that's talking about this shit. Compare that to George Floyd, who you've already admitted that there are millions of people just like. Now, which one do you think, if we took out of society, would society be doing better with?
Well, does the rest of the millions of people that are also George Floyd go with them? Because then, it would be way, way easier to go visit major cities. It would be. But look, man, I guess the crux of the argument, because you tried to make it a very narrow definition of the prompt, but then use much, much wider arguments around it. I guess I'm just trying to figure out if we can both do that.
No, you can, but the difference is I'm putting blame specifically on an individual. I'm saying blame George Floyd for his actions and his rhetoric, and blame Destiny for his actions and his rhetoric. And there's 2 ways that we could look at it: the actual physical crimes, etc., that they're alleged to have done in their lives, and then what their actions and rhetoric have led to in society. George Floyd just having to have happened to died on camera, and then people doing shit, you could interchange him because he never said, if I die, riot. People didn't riot because they listened to his words and went out and rioted. They rioted because of his death. And I'm not saying that George Floyd's worse for society because of those actions. Even then, if you would like, we can have a debate as to whether or not George Floyd and what he would represent would be worse than what Destiny would represent. I'm fine with having that discussion. I would just like a concession to the words of the specific prompt of who is worse for society, George Floyd or Destiny. It's not even close, because George Floyd was a pissant that people were going to find an excuse to riot over, and they just rioted because his death was on camera, whereas Destiny's one of a unique few that has this much influence and terrible rhetoric and policy that's infecting the Democratic Party in a mainstream way. It's not even close.
Right. So to use your example that you provided, William Wallace, who it didn't pan out like the Braveheart movie in any way, shape, or form. I think Mel Gibson hated royals or something, but when after his body was dismembered, he was not even there. It angered the people so much that they uprose, and that was William Wallace's effect on society. Now, in that society, we would call that effect good, and it's good that got put to him. And it's in the Ben Carson example, if Ben Carson's suffered the same fate as George Floyd, and that in and of itself sparked off riots in the similar manner to George Floyd, it would be unfortunate that the legacy of this good man was such a horrible thing, but it would still be the legacy of his life.
But you would say, so just to be clear, then you would say, you would defend the following sentence: Ben Carson was worse for society than Destiny.
If you replace Ben Carson with George Floyd, then yes, the influence or legacy he left to society was worse.
Yeah,
than
in
Destiny.
order for that sentence to work, you have to follow the hypothetical all the way through.
Of somebody that's done anything for Destiny outside of drop trout.
No, that's not true. I don't have to say that people did something specifically because of Destiny. What I have to say is the idea is that Destiny,
because of George Floyd.
What I have to say
ahead,
is Destiny is an influential person that is at the heart of what I believe Democrats are now, and what they're doing is far worse than what George Floyd himself did. Now, going back to as ridiculous as this is, but I admit I brought it up first as a martyr that wanted to be a martyr. I meant in the context of the fictional William Wallace in the movie, nonetheless, because you kind of look like a Viking. That's all I was getting to. But nonetheless, if we want to use William Wallace like the real person, William Wallace, right? The reason we would say that, well, we say he inspired people to go out and take these actions, and we sort of blame him. Blame, not a good word, because we'd say that's a positive thing from our context. Maybe not if you're English, but from our context, a positive thing, right? But that's because that's the type of rhetoric and what William Wallace was pushing for in his life as well. He was pushing for revolting against the English and taking their land back from English rule. And so when he's dead and he's murdered so brutally and he becomes a symbol of that, then we'd say, see the legacy that he left, that we give credit to William Wallace for. If William Wallace was just a dude walking down the street, like in the beginning of Tale of Two Cities, and he's mowed down by a carriage of royals, right? And then people are inspired, we wouldn't say from the context that that was a negative thing. If we were, like the French Revolution, which was a bad thing, right? We wouldn't say, the nameless child that was mowed down was worse for society than Destiny. Because look at the French Revolution and look how bad it was. And in the book, The Tale of Two Cities, if that's a true telling, like you would say, well, no, the people that took that action and then used it for their own heinous, nefarious goals are fucking absolute dog shit. But we're not saying that this poor nameless kid is worse for society than Destiny. That's outlandish. You could say the legacy that people used in the name of was worse. Now, I'm willing to say that once I think Marte and I have sufficiently won this argument on the prompt, I'm willing to go a step further and say, okay, without assigning blame specifically to Destiny or George Floyd, do we think that what they represent is which one is worse? I'm willing to have that debate as well, because I still think that it's Destiny that's worse than the legacy of George Floyd.
I agree, yeah.
Are you saying what they represent, like if they were to write out, I want this for society, Destiny is worse than George Floyd? Is that what you're proposing with that?
My proposal would be that it's an effect that like George Floyd's like a shitty foot soldier that's a grunt on the ground that something bad happened to that people lionized around, where Destiny's more in a upper class of people that's inspiring people to take those heinous actions.
So how much does it cost? How much does it cost to house a prisoner? Average, you know,
it's like $50,000 to $80,000 a year in the United States, depending on the facility.
And George Floyd spent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years of his life in prison. That has nothing to do with, any of the property damage done in his name afterwards. He was responsible for various different destruction of lives in his own community by being a drug dealer. All of those lives.
Give Destiny time. He may be in prison too.
Correct. Yeah.
What's that?
I said give Destiny time. He may end up in prison too.
Sure.
As far as I know,
it hasn't happened yet, so it's irrelevant. Now, the lives that George Floyd personally destroyed, is there a comparison in terms of that you could pull out of your ass possibly to compare the amount of money that people already spent because of George Floyd, the lives that were personally ruined by this individual, the amount of damage and destruction that he caused, not just in his community in Minnesota, but in various different communities in Texas? Is there any kind of comparison for that to Destiny? No, of course there's not.
So Destiny is direct, right? So he's currently influencing society right now, so much so that prominent figures like Elon Musk are telling him that he should be locked up for his rhetoric. We have other people. You already mentioned Piers Morgan. He's actively doing this. You haven't reconciled this right now with the passive argument. So right now, I'm just telling you right now, Destiny is actively not only doing this, but amassing I would say even an army. I can't give you metrics or numbers right now, but I would say right now, even if I was to ask you who is currently creating more destruction in society, I would say Destiny, because we have nuclear families going downhill. Is Destiny promoting this with his previous relationships that are on the front line and being displayed? Him denying the if somebody should be martyred or not on camera, to me, this is also we're also having an admission of allowance having this, because if he's omitting this and refusing to, not call for speak against the violence of Charlie Kirk, and to me, that's like almost like a pushing of this and his social acceptance that he's pushing by his own rhetoric. Right now, we're witnessing propaganda that's ongoing that Destiny's currently continuing to promote. And it's like, so when Rob says things like he could be in prison, he could be in jail, but it's like, give him time. But right now, he's eroding the American family as far as values. He's eroding structures. He's calling for violence. And even more, George Floyd didn't call for American violence towards the dismissal of the nuclear family. He didn't call for this verbatim or say this out loud. It's like society used a patsy. They wanted to hang something up and say, hey, this is the guy. This could have been anybody. Meanwhile, Destiny's actively doing this through different avenues. He's weaponizing X, weaponizing YouTube, and weaponizing various platforms, including like debates like Surrounded. This is putting him up on a more, I would say, a higher hill to be viewed at by everybody else. Whereas George Floyd, he had to be pushed to be on a hill. Destiny's doing this and actually creating work to even be harder, as like hard work to create more of a monolithic entity of destruction on the left of himself.
So interestingly enough, I'm not sure if you understand how words work, but you are a catechumen ortho bro, so I understand that you're being trained to not know how words work. And so when you're saying real effect is damages that have already happened in the real world. It damages that overpass any other riot in our country's history. People have actually been killed. Police have actually been attacked. That's actually happened.
That's really a bad argument. That's
what you're trying to propose is a fiction that you've made up because you don't like Destiny's rhetoric.
No, he has promoted abortion, things like this. He's promoted all this. How many abortions have we had in society?
Not abortion. Not fighting you with that one.
Right. You're not going to do this when it comes to the deletion of babies, things like this, right? So if he's promoting this and debating that this should be a thing that happens because he's pleading for women's rights and decreasing men's, I would say, reproductive rights, that's so much death in America that's also being propagandized to promote for a future society. That's further deconstructing, I would say, traditional values, traditional nuclear families, and other things. I mean, this guy's a propaganda machine. He's a slogan machine as well, too. When he says the bullet should have hit Trump instead. I'm thinking that this has been clipped, shared on thousands of channels, and we've seen this. You know what this rhetoric is. You've heard statements by him before, but you've never heard a statement uttered by George Floyd be a propaganda, meaning George Floyd's slogan written everywhere. Meanwhile, Destiny's slogans are written everywhere, being repeated in mass through YouTube videos, propaganda through X and everywhere else. And he's continually doing this right now as we speak, and he'll do this long after this argument.
Because Destiny's slogans come from his superiors who are actually in charge of things.
Okay, real quick, just out of curiosity, like either Steve or Benjamin, you guys can answer this. Who would you say is worse for society, George Floyd or like the leaders of BLM that inspired people to riot over George Floyd? Which of those two would you say is worse for society?
Well, the leaders of BLM and George Floyd were absolutely intertied, so I'm not sure how you could even separate the two things. That was the cudgel that they used in order to promote the things that they wanted.
So you say that they're equally to blame?
Oh, I don't think George Floyd in any way, shape, or form is to blame for the movement that followed him.
Okay, let me ask you this.
In any way, shape, or form, that's still his legacy. It sucks that his legacy is so horrible.
Okay, let's go a little further with this. Do you think Derek Chauvin's guilty of murder?
No.
You don't. Who's worse for society, Derek Chauvin or Destiny?
Why is that relevant?
Because you're saying it doesn't matter what George Floyd actually said. It's the legacy he left. Well, if Derek Chauvin, if you don't think he's a murderer, let me finish.
Is worse than Destiny.
Oh, so Derek Chauvin, not his legacy. You would say the following statement.
That's what we're talking about.
No. I remind you
him
again,
as a person.
I remind you.
Okay, I don't know him as a person. He's probably a dickhead like most cops, but.
I know this. You keep adding words to the prompt. The prompt was, is George Floyd worse for society than Destiny? So if I said, is Derek Chauvin worse for society than Destiny? You have to say yes, correct? Because if it's not for Derek,
yeah.
Okay, now let's go a step further. Is the person the person that hired Derek Chauvin to be a police officer worse for society than Destiny?
The person that hired him doesn't control his actions.
That doesn't matter, George.
Any of us can have an employee that does dumb things.
I agree. Thank you 100% for proving my point. And George Floyd didn't control the actions of the people posthumously. He didn't control their actions.
They also didn't riot in the name of George Floyd's boss.
It doesn't matter. The point you're making is no. I'll finish my point.
The person with the statues and that they went around going, say his name. Say his name. Had like a little girl up there like, say his name. And all that. That was centered around George Floyd. That's his legacy.
Okay, so the point is, what they admitted here on this side of the ledger, it doesn't matter what an individual does, even if it was Ben Carson. If his death results in people doing things outside of his name and what he wanted that he never called for, that ends up being disastrous, we would say that Ben Carson's worse for society than Destiny, because there were actions that were taken because of what his death resulted in that led to terrible things. Then they say, yes, the same would be true of Derek Chauvin, who they don't think's a murderer. Then we should be able to go through the list of everyone. We should be able to say Derek Chauvin's parents, by giving birth to Derek Chauvin, was worse for society than Destiny. Because had they never given birth to Derek Chauvin, well, then Derek Chauvin would have never been there when George Floyd died, which means George Floyd wouldn't have died that way, which means that we wouldn't have had the riots of George Floyd. The point is, is what we're talking about. Let me finish, please. We're talking about second order consequences. We don't blame people because people took heinous actions, not in their name, if those people had no control over that. Destiny specifically saying heinous serious things that if people act upon are bad for society, and they are at the heart of mainstream Democratic ideology. Now, George Floyd and the terrible things that resulted after him were not that.
You do got to
Okay,
appreciate how
hang on.
goddamn
In
many
order to make
words he
that
can
argument,
fit
you'd
in
have
there.
to show that the
One at a
Democrats
time.
that are in Congress are echoing destiny.
They are.
They're not.
Okay, for
They're
example, Jay Jones.
What?
Jay Jones, he's running for Attorney General of Virginia.
Running for.
And what's that? Attorney General of Virginia, right?
Running for.
Right,
Elected
running
running
for. Okay,
Okay.
running for said that
Not in Congress?
he was cheering for Attorney General of Virginia. Said that he was cheering for the death of political opponents' children. Right? He is still
horrible.
endorsed by the entirety of the Democratic Party, including those in Congress.
Yeah, because they
Jesus,
kind of
they're
sign
children?
contracts
That's
saying they have
wild.
to.
Yes, he
But
did
that's,
say that.
It's ancillary to the argument. Doesn't mean they have to support them once they're in there, and it doesn't mean that's how they govern when they're in there, because they certainly don't.
It doesn't. What do you mean it doesn't matter?
Say we should give more money to Israel, but that's the party line for a segment of the Democrats, just like it's a party line for a segment of the GOP.
Okay, your
That's
point
not
seems
destiny influencing Congress. That's Destiny's paychecks.
Destiny
influencing his rhetoric.
influences Destiny, and people like him influence voters, and those voters vote for people that share their
good.
ideology. And what the Democratic Party politicians are doing right now is saying things like this: Donald Trump is a fan of that Austrian painter guy. That's ubiquitous to the entire message of the Democratic Party. Something that Destiny's been saying since 2018, 2019. Destiny said that when it came to the Floyd riots, that rioting is the other side of the coin to voting. That's what Destiny said. So when you talk about people whose voices were out there cheering on riots, that's what Destiny said. In fact, when I asked him specifically about this, he said, "This is America, baby. That's what we do." What do you think things like the Boston Tea Party was? There are people out there that were justifying the riots of George Floyd using that exact same rhetoric, right? So the idea
Didn't
that
you
like,
make a Sorry, didn't you make the point though that out of that same guy's mouth he said that right-wing militias should shoot the protesters?
Marte said that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
But
then he's an inconsistent blowhard.
That's right.
Discount him further.
he's someone who cheers for violence when it suits his purposes, much like the problem with the George Floyd
So he's an
riots.
opportunist.
Let me ask you a question specifically, Steve. Something you said in your opening statement. You said the only thing keeping Destiny's rhetoric alive are people like Marte and me, and then you tried to insult like Ortho Bros or some shit like that. Correct? That's your stance?
Before you
No,
go
I didn't
in,
say only.
before you
But
go in,
yeah, you're
Steve,
a
let
huge
me-
part of it. Yeah.
Before you go in, Steve, let me answer him quick. It's on his other statement. You know what's funny is this also works in the opposite way. So if the more recent stories that have come out about Martin Luther King are correct, he was a horrible person.
Sure.
But an awesome movement got, and so many great effects are his legacy, no matter how bad of a person he is, no matter how much Gandhi was a PDF file. The movement that stemmed from him, even though he was a trash human being, it's a good thing. The legacy that follows does not necessarily match the person. So trying to pin it on them like they're personally responsible, nobody's doing that. But what they are saying is that George Floyd's legacy, the things that stemmed from him in his name, way worse than anything Destiny could have. Rob has been conceding this the whole night, where he says the whole DNC said this. Did the whole DNC take their marching orders from Destiny? Was he sitting there with his blue hair and his jaw going, I can't even do it. Like, hey, Democrats, I'm Destiny. And they all just kind of marched to what he was saying, or is he just a cog in the wheel and just repeating the things that were said before him?
Okay,
All right,
so
go
two
ahead.
things. One, to answer that latter point, if we would agree that Destiny's not the single person that's making decisions with the Democratic Party, but Destiny certainly as an individual has more influence on the direct policies that the voters that support the Democrats than George Floyd did on anyone that was doing anything in his name. Secondly, when you give the example of someone like MLK, yes, it's true that all sorts of people in history are known for representing something that maybe means they're a good person. For example, Mother Teresa. But if you look into their personal life, you might say, wait a minute, they were infidelitous, they treated women like shit, et cetera, whatever it may be. The reason that we would still say that someone like MLK is responsible for his legacy is because that legacy isn't about the adultery and shit like that necessarily. It's about the things that he was saying, that he was claiming, the direction that he wanted society to go in, right? We don't have any of that with George Floyd. We don't. Again, you can't get over this. It would be like blaming that kid in The Tale of Two Cities that got ran over by a carriage and saying he's worse for society because his death led to the French Revolution. That would be asinine. It would be asinine to blame that kid and say that he was worse. That's just asinine. Now, to get back to Steve's point,
just
he
real
said,
quick, I never said you're the only people keeping him around. I said you are a big part of it.
okay, but you said, but if it weren't for people like Marte and me, granted, you're not saying just us. If it wasn't for people like us, then Destiny wouldn't have influence, correct?
He would have significantly less because it's a problem reaction solution thing.
Okay, who picked the topic?
With every other mouthpiece of every other political organization, and that's what Destiny is. He doesn't set or make policy. He's a propagandist. He's a paid propagandist, and that's it. And all of those people are interchangeable.
Who picked the topic for this debate?
Marte. I was giving him shit on X, and you know, we've debated
about George Floyd.
We're doing we're frenemies. Okay. You know, so we've debated before, and we were having fun with each other on X about George Floyd and Destiny. So and he said, let's debate it. And I said,
Ozempic, we get the point.
No, wait. Who brought up George Floyd, though? Did Marte bring up George Floyd to you, or did
you? It was Marte's X posts where he was making this claim.
He made the claim that Destiny was worse than George Floyd.
Well, he was making the claim that of how horrible Destiny was for society. I don't remember exactly.
And then you said George Floyd was worse, or something like that.
Yeah, I argued that George Floyd was definitely
Thank
worse.
you.
Yeah.
Now, the point I want to make is if you say that we're responsible for keeping Destiny's name in the limelight, who the fuck is talking about George Floyd other than you two?
Everybody.
Yeah. Who? Name them.
I just saw where Cori Bush is running for Congress, and her opening commercial, again, because she got ousted, her opening commercial for "I'm back in the game" is, I fought hard on behalf of George Floyd in the Black Lives Matter movement.
Okay, so you got Cori Bush.
So that's
BLM.
what?
It's their band.
BLM's weighing. They have almost no influence now. Everyone accepts they're a fucking joke.
There is a George Floyd memorial day amongst the community that is celebrated in communities and schools throughout the fucking year after year now. It's not that it's gone away. It's that you're not hearing it in your feeds, and everybody lives in their own little algorithmic bubble.
What I'm saying,
but if you go on Black Twitter right now, I guarantee you'll find several thousand posts.
What I'm saying is the idea that you could somehow impugn us in any way by talking about the things that a person in real life is saying on mainstream platforms about wanting Republicans to fear for their lives when they go into public, which is a mainstream view in the Democratic Party, and saying, well, that wouldn't have any power if people like Marte and I didn't notice and talk about it, while at the same time you guys incessantly going on about George Floyd, someone that basically the Democrats are fucking running from at this point because they understand what a PR disaster it is at this point. It just kind of shows the double standard of what you're employing here. You're actually guilty of the very thing that you're accusing us of.
I do got to ask, are you guys scared of the blue-haired, tuck their peepees in between their legs army that just plays video games out there? I just got to ask. And also, Marte, to answer your question, I don't know where to get bulk baby oil in 55-gallon barrels.
What was the first question?
Oh, that wasn't on the show. That's my bad.
What was the first question? Being serious about what? About blue-haired? What? Do I play video games?
I'm asking if you're scared of the army of blue-haired video gamers that tuck their genitals between their legs. That army of destiny.
Do you think Charlie Kirk was afraid of them?
No, Charlie Kirk definitely wasn't.
Oh, well, maybe they should have. His security should have been a little more, huh?
Well, I don't know that has it been shown that guy followed Destiny? Is this going to be your first example of Charlie Kirk? Is this going to be your first example of a real world implication of something Destiny's saying causing an actual reaction? Was it a Destiny follower that did it?
Oh, hold on. Destiny promoted this. He actually omitted and denied, basically refusing that this was supposed to happen. He didn't. He literally was saying this on Piers Morgan. I don't know what you're talking about. He's doing this in front of a massive audience.
The point, it doesn't matter.
With I love Destiny.
It doesn't matter.
Balderson,
correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. It seemed to be that the intent of your question, I'll steelman your position, is like, you're afraid of some transsexuals that have their hair blue and play.
That was me just asking a question.
Let me finish my point. It seemed to be that was the thrust of what you were suggesting. We shouldn't be afraid of these fucking loner weirdos that just play video games and dye their hair blue. That's the exact type of guy that killed Charlie Kirk. That's the exact type of people that right now are attacking ICE. That's the exact type of guy that killed 2 detainees trying to shoot at ICE officers. That's the exact type of guy that went into a Catholic school here recently and shot up a bunch of people at that school. The exact same type of people. So I understand it's popular to say, they're a bunch of pussies. Who's worried about them? They're committing acts of terrorism in real time.
Yeah, it's true. Completely. And he's inciting violence currently alongside this happening
there's
in real time.
Right wingers committing same said violence in the name of
what?
Name them. Recently, go ahead. Name them.
Steve, he's the political guy.
Let's hear it. Let's hear the right wing equivalents.
No, I can't. I'm not going to defend that one.
Thanks, Steve, for being wise there.
What I do notice is lots and lots of patterns. And what I've seen is that while there's been a pendulum swing in terms of who's doing the domestic terrorism now over the last 5, maybe 6 years.
I disagree with that, but go ahead. There's been no swing. It's been the left the entire time.
I don't know about that, man.
Cite me. Where are you going to cite? Where are you getting your evidence?
John Hinckley.
Well, I'm going
to makes bad music now too, which might even be worse.
Was that the last 5 years? I'm not very good student of history. I thought that was outside that skill. He said in the last 5 years.
Yeah, in terms of left-wing violence, yeah, absolutely.
No,
absolutely.
I think that when you're looking at these studies that are saying, okay, it's a new thing that left-wing violence is more, when you look at those, they're outlandish. For example, most of those studies will say that there was almost no acts of left-wing violence in 2020. That's despite the fact that you guys are arguing the point that George Floyd led to all this left-wing violence. Yeah, they don't count that as left-wing violence, though, in those studies.
Yeah,
we know that.
Studies.
Right. So then my argument is that it's been the left, at least since the election of Donald Trump, that's more likely to use violence. Not just lethal violence like the shooting of Steve Scalise or, the assassination attempts of Trump, which led to the death of Corey Competore or the death of Charlie Kirk, but also low level of violence. People that have Teslas being vandalized, the cheering on of Luigi Mangione, assassinated the United Healthcare CEO, people, pro-life centers being attacked routinely, Republican centers, people wearing MAGA hats being attacked. All of this shit, the assassination attempt of Brett Kavanaugh. Everybody knows that with the election of Donald Trump in 2016, the reason that shops were boarding up their businesses was because the fucking left was going to lose their minds in riots. And they did. Over and over and over. So I think you're mischaracterizing to say that in the past 5 years, the pendulum swung to the left being more violent. I don't think that's true. I think that's been the case since at least 2015.
So 10 years.
My guess is
we're old. Them extra couple of years don't make that much difference. But
so I will say this: each and every time,
one at a time, you're both
abortion clinics getting bombed, and
when was the last one?
Outside. Again, I don't keep up with it, but that was a pretty prominent thing. I lived through the Satanic Panic. That was some crazy shit. That was all very right wing.
Did you live through the Weather Underground as well?
Did I what?
Did you live through the Weather Underground as well?
What is the weather?
Left-wing terrorists that were basically promoted overwhelmingly to areas in academia. Bill Ayers was one of them, who was Obama's mentor. These were left-wing terrorists that were committing acts of violence all through the 70s.
So far afield from 10 years ago.
Right. So, your partner brought it up, not me.
And I don't think he was around in 72 yet, but maybe.
No, I don't know how old you are. That fucking old. Fuck y'all.
Yeah.
Dye your beard, you old fucker.
So what I've seen is that every time there's an event on U.S. soil, regardless of what party is in office, it is always used as an excuse to limit rights, limit privileges, and further reduce people into ideological corners where all they're going to do is red team, blue team, bark, bark, bark. While all the while, regardless who's in office, the rights of the individual decrease, the surveillance increases, and the propensity for state violence increases. It's a problem, reaction, solution ordeal. And right now we have the current president talking with cheers and applause and massive support to send in the National Guard and the Marines into U.S. cities to go after anyone, citizen or otherwise, that they deem is inappropriate in that moment. That is a massive constitutional overreach. And I know that's not the original, but this is what happens every time.
Okay, so if that's the case,
administration isn't happy. Wait, what is shocking to you, Morte?
No, if I
It's just go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
So here's the point, Steve. Can you show me post George Floyd riots where that occurred?
Where that occurred? Absolutely. Yes. More and more surveillance cameras went up. We have a
police body cams.
What's that? No. Like I don't know if you live near a major city or not, but surveillance in terms of cameras mounted absolutely everywhere have increased exponentially
by the government
since 2020. What's that?
By the government,
city, state, yes.
But not just by private entities, but by government entities.
Oh, no, they don't happen without private entities. And in fact, the private entities maintain ownership. They just get approved at a government level to be installed. Third party maintains the ownership of the equipment, and then that equipment is sent to something called a fusion center. Do you know what a fusion center is?
Sure. So let me logically go through your argument here then. George Floyd is worse because after his death, people decided to mass riot, which caused billions of dollars in damage, which then caused business owners to get surveillance cameras because of all the looting and death and destruction. And that somehow we should say that's bad, that surveillance increased.
Business owners also did increase their personal ownership
on that with that comment.
State surveillance increased massively as well.
You just said it was all private that got permission through state.
You said you knew what a fusion center was. What is it?
A fusion center is fusion centers are areas that we send this data to that sort of looks into this data and interprets it through sort of different lens of investigators.
Who looks at the data?
Who gets the data?
Yeah, what are the entities at the fusion center that look at the data?
So you have law enforcement that's looking at data, but it depends on the type of fusion center. There are also private fusion centers. Like you could make the argument that a lot of the collection in places like social media are also fusion centers.
Well, they're also private entities.
Right. So you just asked me who it was. Yes, it could be law enforcement or private entities.
Public-private. Government and private facing.
The point is, I think that the effect of the George Floyd riots were actually, in general, the opposite of what you're suggesting, which were criticism of law enforcement and their powers. And so what happened both after Ferguson and the riots we saw there and after the George Floyd was we saw a pulling back of police resources, which predictably led, and you can see this in 2020, to more death, destruction, violence, criminality, etc. Now, what we see is if there are right-wingers or certain groups that commit acts of violence are alleged to, then yes, we see that government overreach. I argue with the left over and over again in the Summer of Love. If there's one right-wing riot, you people will lose your fucking mind. And they said, no, that wouldn't be the case. Then we saw January 6th, and my channel got struck all the time because of January 6th, and you weren't allowed to talk about whether or not there was malfeasance in the 2020 election, and then you weren't allowed to talk about certain things regarding the flu that came from the country of China. You couldn't talk about those sorts of things. So yes, I do agree with you. I do agree with you that oftentimes acts of violence do mean that the state usurps more and more control. However, the point I'm trying to make is the people that are in positions of institutional power actually like when these lefties go out and commit acts of violence. That's why they allow it to occur with near impunity. That's why Seattle had a Chaz zone that there was almost no effect whatsoever. That's why we see places like Portland that there's riots and insurrections that occur on a nightly basis and there's almost nothing that's ever done by law enforcement. The truth is that it's not a both sides do it. And by the way, this isn't even the topic of the debate, but I'm more than fucking happy to take it here.
You missed the point entirely. Though.
I don't.
I didn't say both sides did it. I said regardless of who's in office, both of those sides capitalize on that to use it to limit our rights and all of our
It's
civil liberties.
it's a point that I would be interested to talk about, like on a different debate. I don't think it's germane to this topic whatsoever.
Yeah.
Suffice it to say, right? Like I think that the left-wing violence is how we got on this has been overwhelming. But if we want to get to, because I keep getting accused of, I think that I already made the point that we're winning the way the topic is worded. If we're going to say people that did things as a result of the symbolism of George Floyd versus the symbolism of influential people like Destiny saying what he is, I think that it breaks down quite simply. The people on the ground level, the George Floyd type people that may be killed by police, that people then use their name to go out and commit heinous actions, are less culpable and less damaging to society than people like on the higher tier, like the influencer tier, that are encouraging people to take acts of violence because of those deaths. Will you concede this, that you could find dozens upon dozens of footage anytime you want of what looks like police involved in a terrible interaction with black men, or for that matter, any race that you would like?
Oh, sure. Yeah. If you see it clipped, yeah.
So then the point is
100% of the time, it's usually the individual who's getting the shit kicked out of them by a number of cops. It's usually their fault.
So I would say for example, when it takes the LA riots, someone like Al Sharpton's more responsible than Rodney King himself.
This is the argument for stochastic terrorism, which again,
do you disagree with that
legal
claim?
Definition for, but in reality, what you're saying is the what if influencer A says words that I don't like, and then I can relate some violence to those words. What if that happens is more dangerous than the hundreds of millions of dollars of damage that has already happened, that currently happens, is more dangerous than the ideology that runs through, BLM and those organizations, as opposed to the neocon type liberalism splashed with hedonistic dumbfuckery that Destiny promotes.
Okay, that I think you misunderstand the point. Allow me to talk about in a non-hypothetical situation. Who's more responsible for the LA riots? Rodney King? Rodney King?
Is there like a double speed?
Rodney King or the black leaders that told people to go out and riot or encourage them to? Who's more responsible? Simple question.
By the time that you heard a single black leader utter a single word about that, there were already 35 cities on fire.
Okay,
that's a nonsensical point.
That's not true, because black leaders have been drumming up people to these effects for years.
You just said, what about the black leaders? Who's more dangerous, Al Sharpton or Rodney King? Who's more responsible for the LA riots? There were no black leaders in the wake of Rodney King, except for like a couple of crazy people down in LA that were like, yeah, let's go do this.
Okay, I think you don't
have them in the moment, just, rolling up in the church bus with Reverend Al up at the driver's seat going, get in, we going looting. You don't have that.
I think you're mischaracterizing what happened, though I have to admit that I don't 100% know for sure. Your argument is Rodney King happened, and right out of the gate, people were rioting like that night before any black leader had a chance to comment. That's your claim?
No, when the innocent verdict came in for all the officers, because one of the differences between the Rodney King incident and the George Floyd incident is there was no justice in what happened to Rodney King. In the George Floyd incident, even though that officer was found guilty and so said justice would have been delivered, there was still a violent reaction that was taken, and cities burned and things were destroyed, even though the system worked as it's supposed to work in that incident.
Again, the point that you're making a differentiation that's not germane to the point we're asking here. The point I'm asking here is, a guy who got beaten by police. By the way, Balderson, I'll ask you specifically, do you think that Rodney King was innocent and was beaten inappropriately by police?
I don't think he was innocent. I definitely think he was beaten inappropriately. I've seen the video and remember from back in the day, and the police had him on the ground surrounded, and they were jumping in, smoking him with billy clubs and then jumping back out. And the dude was just like a fucking pinata. It was insane. And I don't disagree that if you're being violent yourself or you're uncooperative and forcing them to up the force, that is a thing that will happen, and you are definitely responsible for that upping of force. But at some point in time, they're also responsible. No different than if you came up and punched me in the jaw and I got on top of you and just started pounding your head into the ground. They would absolutely say you put undue at some point in time. It went from you defended yourself to you were now the aggressor.
Who's worse for society, Rodney King or Destiny?
Whose effects on society were worse? Rodney King.
That's not the question. The question is, let me word it specifically. Is Rodney King worse for society than Destiny?
His effects absolutely were.
Okay, so who's worse for society, Rodney King or the cops that beat him?
The cops that beat him would be equivalent because they also brought about that entire reaction. I don't remember their names.
Wait, so then how's their legacy
Mark
worse?
Furman, he was the lead.
Mark Furman. Yeah.
Wait, Furman was OJ. Was he also in Rodney King?
Yeah.
You don't remember the legacy of the names of the police officers. You don't even remember their names.
I realize I don't remember the legacy, but they it's equivalently their legacy.
Again,
sure.
The point is,
but everybody knows Derek Chauvin's name, don't they?
They do, right? The point is, the point I'm trying to make, if you're saying that by the actions that someone had aggressed upon them by law enforcement, that if people go out and choose to riot because they saw that person's legacy is to blame, or you would say that person is worse for society.
They chose to riot because the system was broken. The system was broken. Anybody that watched that video can't justify the last 20 minutes or whatever it was of them just mercilessly beating.
Okay, if that's the case, then why is Rodney King worse for society than Destiny? If they were rioting against an unjust system.
Well, that is a valid point, that the societal changes that derive from that.
Right. That's crazy.
I wouldn't say that the means to that were great. I guess the means justifying the end. So that
you're all over the place.
You do have a valid point,
right? You're all over the place here. And let me just say this: I stand by my claim that the person, like when you had the Crown Heights riots and you had people like Al Sharpton that were like sort of inflaming people to do that, they're more responsible for those riots than, say, some black person that was negatively affected. In that case, I think it was by Jewish people or by police officers or something like that. And so given that, I think that you would say there are multiple tiers of people. The actual on-the-ground shithead that's looting a store or rioting, probably less damaging to society as a caricature or as a symbol than the person that's sort of gaslighting those people to go out and doing that. That's saying the society's systemically racist and you're owed reparations and violence is the language of the unheard, and this is mostly peaceful. That tier of people is worse for society, right? Because they're actually causing the framework that allows more individuals. The low-level people, just the grunt on the ground, might be much like you might say in a war. Well, yes, it's the grunts on the ground that are actually inflicting the most lethality on their opponents, but any one of those grunts is easily interchangeable as opposed to the leadership class. That next tier up, the people that are leaders. And then when you go to the next tier up as the generals, they're even more responsible than the colonels or more influential for the way that system's working. The same would be true here. Destiny's a higher tier than someone like George Floyd as a symbol because he's the person that's influencing tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people to create this framework that violence is justified.
Then why isn't Destiny causing riots and causing actual actions to happen?
Neither did George Floyd.
Why did Al Sharpton need George Floyd or Rodney King as a figure? If he had that power to do it all on his own, as you're trying to make out, why did they need him? Why aren't they just, because you're telling me that's what their rhetoric is.
That point makes no sense, Balderman. Balderson, that point makes no sense. Destiny is using his power. George Floyd was given his power from people that weren't George Floyd. They handed him this. They used him as a patsy. This was handed to him, whereas Destiny, he's utilizing this massive platform to go ahead and incite violence right now. So you have somebody who's active, like my point again, George Floyd is passive. This was handed to him. This could be moved from goalpost to goalpost, one black guy to another black guy. When it comes to Destiny, oh, you can't move this around because it's specifically one leader. How many Destinies do we have? One Destiny. You have 1,000 George Floyds out there.
You've already conceded the point that there's literally, we all have cameras. And so you could literally, I used to say this all the time, you could pick a race. I want to see someone of Asian descent being assaulted by police officers. You can find it. If you look for footage, because there's so many people in the world, or in the country, so many police officers, and everybody has a camera now that can record. Of course, if you wanted to paint a picture to cause people to do acts of violence, I'll remind you, during 2020, now I might be slightly off on the years, they polled Democrats and said, how many unarmed black men do you think are killed by police a year? And over 50% of them, I believe it was, said over 1,000. The real answer in 2020, 12. Right? So it's not George Floyd that was the problem. It's how he was represented. What people said about, oh my God, it's systemic racism. Look what police are doing. They're out there killing by the scores, unarmed black men. That's the problem and what's going on here. That's what justified. Hell, the riots weren't even limited to the United States. There were riots in places like the UK. What the fuck do they have to do with policing in the United States? This is because it was primed by people that want to push this racial division narrative. All they had to do was wait until it was close to the election, find an example that would fit into their narrative, and bam, they ran with it. It happened to be George Floyd. He is interchangeable. Yeah. The people like Destiny, while you're absolutely correct that there are other people like Destiny, it's not the thousands of thousands, if not millions of interchangeable people like George Floyd. He is, as you've conceded, amongst the top 5 most influential Democratic streamers.
Yeah,
I didn't concede that because I have no idea who the top.
Well, your partner did. How about that?
Yeah, no, I think I named at least like 5 or 6 different people that would put him below top 5.
Okay, name them again. Hassan, Crystal Ball, I'm not so sure it's true. Kyle Kalinske, I'm not so sure it's true, but fine. Let's say we accept those. Who else?
The Young Turks.
Okay, that's 4.
Let's see, Jimmy Dore.
Jimmy Dore does not have the influence of Destiny, nor is he a Democrat at this point.
Yeah, not even close. That's crazy.
You don't think? Okay.
I mean, he's vehemently anti-Democrat.
Yeah,
like the mainstream Democrats.
He's still vehemently progressive policy.
True, but he's not. He's not like the views of the Democrats.
And all of Rob's. I do appreciate he says it so fast. I swear to God, he's somehow on 1.5, and we're all on like.
My brain works fast. Sorry,
but my tongue don't even move that fast. I mean, dude, your wife, happy woman. I get it.
She doesn't watch me, so she's not going to hear that.
But all of that
that's funny.
Came out for him to say half of fame is just being at the right place at the right time. We all agree. So George Floyd was the lucky one who's got to be the martyr. I mean, William Wallace, I'm sure he was sitting there going, God, I want to be drawn and quartered and my body parts to be delivered to major cities so that way I can inspire more people to come fight. Or he just wanted to keep fighting. So being the martyr, I get it. He doesn't choose to be the martyr. Outside of your mythical Jesus, nobody does. Nobody's like, you know what?
You don't believe Jesus existed as a person?
I want to get ruthlessly murdered today. That's my goal for today. Nobody says that.
I mean, again, I don't understand what the relevancy is to this other than saying you've conceded. Do you think that had the George Floyd thing not happened, that Democrats would have found an excuse to riot over racial matters in the 2020 election?
100%. And then that would be the martyr.
Okay.
But they still needed a martyr.
So then when we're asking what's worse for society, wouldn't you say that it implies that if this person was taken out, society would have been marginally better?
If nobody had rioted over George Floyd and he had just remained a nameless fentanyl addict that committed a lot of crimes, and some other person had been killed and they used his name, then his effect on society would be worse than Destiny's, and George Floyd's effect would be not. Because nobody would know who the fuck he is.
What we're ultimately talking about is what's worse for the propaganda operation, the catalyst or the people that push it.
Right. But again, when you're admitting that there was inevitably a catalyst anyways, it'd be the equivalent of saying, like, let's say that we're talking about specific types of firearms, right? And some heinous person uses a specific type of firearm to commit an act of violence. And we say, if that firearm didn't exist, then that wouldn't have happened. And I said, but don't you all agree you would have just used this one? And you're like, yeah. Well, that's what we're talking about here. There was an interchangeable. They planned on doing these sorts of riots, right? And you're all acknowledging that. You're like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. So what we're asking about, what we're saying is that because George Floyd is interchangeable, right? And they would have just used some excuse to riot no matter what. They would have eventually found what they were looking for here and did these same sorts of riots. Then no, we wouldn't say that Floyd himself, who by the way never had any connections to calling for these riots or anything like that. It was the people behind him that were intentionally setting up the riots that wanted these riots to occur are the ones that we are blaming and should say are worse for society. And again, we see this all over here. Like, again, like you could go ad infinitive down the list and say, well, even people that aren't George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, you could say is worse for society than Destiny. The police chief is theoretically worse for society than Destiny because he theoretically had Derek Chauvin trained. Derek Chauvin's mother's theoretically worse because if Derek Chauvin
we're doing this ridiculous thing again?
What's that?
We're doing this ridiculous thing.
No, the point is you can't give a differentiation why that wouldn't be the case.
Because his boss didn't actively have involvement in the incident.
Did George Floyd actively have involvement in the riots of George Floyd?
He actively was the spark of the riots.
He was not part of the riots. Show me one riot he was at.
He was the spark of the riot.
Okay, he may have been.
You might have noticed that because they had like signs with his name.
Are you denying the possibility of the spirit of George
Floyd's name?
Like, I don't know what to say. It's just absurd. Do you think Derek Chauvin's worse for society than Destiny?
Yeah.
Okay, no one was saying his name when they were rioting.
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of people brought him up in each and every speech.
So I just want to be clear.
So yeah, his name was said a lot.
No, it wasn't. It was not.
Those protests. Derek Chauvin's. Oh, he was
really?
used as a
really. You know his name because
every
nobody
organizer, every activist, anybody with a bullhorn shouted out that dude's name. Oh my God!
What percentage of the rioters do you think knew George Floyd's name?
What I would say a solid any given riot. Conservatively 80%.
What percentage do you think knew Derek Chauvin's name?
Equal, if not greater, because of how often it was on the news.
I mean, that's the dumbest thing that I've heard amongst a bunch of dumb things this
week. I just want to.
No, wait. I just want to. Let me repeat what you just.
Name and face wasn't being pushed out through every single media outlet.
No, listen. I know when you say
it
something stupid, the idea is to filibuster so people can't hear what you just said. You just said the following: that more people rioting for George Floyd knew Derek Chauvin's name than George Floyd.
You're lying through your teeth right now.
You said equal or more knew Derek Chauvin than George Floyd. That's what you fucking just said.
Equal or same. Yeah.
No, you didn't say equal or same. You said equal or more.
Equal or more, Steve. You might not have meant it, but that is
they were pumping out Derek Chauvin's name
by your own
every
people.
fucking
That's
media
crazy.
outlet. I guarantee you, they knew who they were mad at. I guarantee.
They did not. They knew they were mad at a cop. George Floyd's name was ubiquitous. His name was said almost everywhere. That's not the case with Derek Chauvin. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It wasn't even close.
That's why you know it.
I knew it after he was.
Know the name of the guys who beat Rodney King?
I do not.
Weird. Why?
Well, one, because it was a long time ago. Maybe if you asked me like 3 or 4 years afterwards, if I was an adult at the time, I would have known. And secondly, because they weren't people that were found guilty. That's now one of the most important prisoners in the country. Who, by the way,
because their name wasn't said everywhere by everybody.
It wasn't said by everyone at every
whichever
time.
One. I mean, you got that bunch of nonsense you spilled out. Like
Balderson, did you stream at the time?
Streaming was not available in the 80s.
No. I mean George Floyd, 2020.
Yeah.
You did. So if I went back to like the day after George Floyd died, when we saw Minneapolis on fire and they burnt down the police precinct, you knew Derek Chauvin's name?
I did not know either name.
You didn't know George Floyd's name.
I actually speak on alchemy and different religions and things like that. I'm not a political guy. I honestly didn't.
Yeah, no, it shows. It shows.
I did. We were. Yeah.
I mean, it's a joke. Everybody knows that more people knew Floyd's name than Derek Chauvin. Everybody knows it. What were some of the other? There were other officers that were found guilty. What was their names?
Bobby Lee.
Is that true? Or is that a comedian?
Little column A, little column B, but I do believe his last name was Lee.
Now, I will say you're not doing it. Do you know what Bobby Lee's? I don't know if you knew this. Someone told me this. I was hanging out with a comedian the other day. You want to know what Bobby Lee's, the comedian's, final joke's been for like the last 10 years at his stand-up? So it's interesting that you said his name. He actually shows his butthole. So, Steve,
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're a big fan, like based on the positioning of your mic there to your mouth. So
I've yet to go see Bobby
Oh
Lee
my
in concert.
God.
Yet to be there.
he is funny, though.
Yeah.
I'll admit that. Nonetheless, what I'm saying is there were other officers that were found guilty. We don't know their names. So I'll ask you, Balderson, Officer B that was found guilty. Are they worse for society than Destiny?
Officer B did not actively have a part in the actual actions. That's why they were not convicted of actual murder, but being either being an accessory or some such other thing. They weren't actively doing it, so of course nobody knows their name. Also,
That's
most
not the
people don't know
question. That's not
names
the
of all
question. Are
band
they
members,
worse?
just the lead singer.
Are they worse
That's how
for?
that works.
My question wasn't why do people not know their names. My question was, are they
Because
worse for?
nobody talks about them because they were.
That's not my
accessories. They didn't
question.
have their
Again, you
neon
repeat an answer to a question that I didn't ask. My question is, are they worse for society than Destiny?
Are those guys worse in
Correct.
society than Destiny?
Correct.
Oof, that's a tough question. I do think that cops that let other cops do things that they shouldn't, but I don't really think Chauvin was doing anything that he shouldn't have been. So no, them other cops were also just following procedure.
So is
So
Derek
I
Chauvin?
would
So
say
Derek
that they're
Chauvin.
fine.
Okay, so given that, if Derek Chauvin didn't do, and in your estimation, Derek Chauvin didn't do anything outside the book, is he worse for society than Destiny?
His legacy is yes.
Himself, not his legacy.
Him himself, no. As a person, well, I don't know. Probably not as a person.
Okay.
Again, we have to divide it into were they as a person what we in this society consider a good person, and then what was their effect on the society? Just like I went through numerous times.
What?
We
Martin
got
Luther
you.
King may have been a shitbag.
It took-
but his legacy is a good one.
It took 2 hours and 15 minutes or something, but we got you there. So I'll ask one last time. The
You got me where?
The
Were
prompt
you
of the
trying to
debate.
give me
One at a time.
Let me-
Gentlemen,
Wow.
you are doing so good. Go ahead, Rob.
The prompt reads, is George Floyd worse for society than Destiny? Not, is the legacy of George Floyd worse for society than the legacy of Destiny?
Yeah,
if you
it's George
say,
Floyd.
if you say the legacy of Derek Chauvin's worse for society than Destiny, but you wouldn't say that Derek Chauvin's worse for society than Destiny, then the same argument would apply to George Floyd. You lose the debate.
Oh, that's it, bro.
George Floyd's legacy.
Yes, we just
And
got
it
done
works for
saying, you're
society.
saying
Yeah.
the prompt doesn't say legacy, it says the person. You said that Derek Chauvin's legacy is worse for society than Destiny,
If you're
but
not,
Derek
if you're
Chauvin
not,
is
if
not
you're not
worse.
looking at the legacy or the things that they've done to affect the effect of society around them, well, then guess what, buddy? You lose so badly because the guy that is just a bit of a sexual deviant and has a couple civil suits against him, way better than the guy that ran around slinging coke and robbing people, putting guns up to pregnant women's bellies. Unless you're telling me that that's a better person. I mean, I don't know where your moral set is. I don't think you're an ortho bro, Rob. So I'm not 100% sure where your moral set is on that. I don't know if it's an objective thing given by God where they have to turn over your own. I don't know what metric to use for you. Maybe a gun to a pregnant woman's stomach is a more serious infringement on society than getting a BJ by another dude or giving a BJ to another.
Alderson,
dude.
can I ask you a question right now? So if Floyd never passed, do you think that he would be worse for society than Destiny?
Then the effect would not have taken place, and no, he would not. It's
Okay.
same as if it was filled in by
Wow,
another.
this is-
Oh, you're so bad at this. So let me tell you what, Marte, great question. So what you just said was, when
That's
I pointed
insane.
out, let's go step by step with what just happened. You said, look, Derek Chauvin's legacy is worse than Destiny. But if the question was, is Derek Chauvin worse for society than Destiny, then the answer is no. And when I say, well, notice that the
I didn't debate that
Let
prompt.
me finish. I said, notice the prompt says, is George Floyd worse for society than Destiny? Not, is George Floyd's legacy worse for society than Destiny? You counter this by saying, yes, but can't you see George Floyd was this drug addict and he was this terrible person and blah, 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 blah. Is he worse from society than Destiny? Then Marte, what was the question you just asked?
I said, if George Floyd never died, would he be worse than Destiny?
You then say
Oh,
no.
sorry,
He
sorry,
wouldn't
I
be,
see
thereby
that you do
refuting
have
the
that,
previous thing.
Yeah.
You
I
just
know you're on.
refuted
I
everything
know
that
you're
you.
on
Let me
team.
finish.
On
One at a
Team
time,
Crucible,
one at
so
a
you might
time.
have
Hold
some
on.
of that
Let me
ortho
finish,
bro
and then
thing
I
where you
promise.
don't get how
Let me
funds
finish.
work.
Hold on, Ben.
I promise you can finish. I'm wrapping it up. So you say, well, if it was just no legacy, if it's just the person, then George Floyd, the person, is worse than Destiny. And then Marte says, but if he wouldn't have passed away, would he have been worse? And you're like, clearly not. That just refutes everything you just said prior to that about George Floyd, the person, being worse for society than Destiny. Now you're going to backtrack again.
You're trying to compare apples and oranges at that point, and you're
No.
saying, "Well, Destiny, yes."
You just
You're
changed the
saying,
prompt
you're
entirely.
saying Destiny's,
Your whole
you're saying
position right
Destiny's
when I
effect
said
on
you.
society, i.e., the things other people are going to do in Destiny's name, potentially, which you've never come up with one. That
That's
is
the
somehow
legacy.
Shooting
worse
Charlie Kirk.
I'm not talking about
than
his
George
legacy.
Floyd as a person. You're trying to do apples to oranges, and I get it that you guys don't know how to keep things straight like that. I get that, but you can't take Destiny's, the things that people do in Destiny's name, and then say, well, I'm measuring that against George Floyd as a person. We're either taking George Floyd's legacy or the things people did in his name and the things that people did in Destiny's name and measuring them against each other, in which case you severely lose.
Alderson,
Or
no.
we
This is
measure
Alderson.
Destiny against. Hold on, rub some baby oil on.
Yeah.
One at a time. One at a
Rub
time,
some
gentlemen.
baby
We're
oil
almost
on.
there.
It's okay. All right. Or we say, is George Floyd as a person better or worse than Destiny as a person? And you lose in both categories. And I get that that was always a losing proposition for you guys. I appreciate you taking it.
That's not what was occurring. We argued this at the beginning, that the reason that what you're saying is erroneous is the individual actions of Destiny. We didn't get into it, and I'm glad we didn't talk about the sexual dalliances, the allegations of Destiny, whether or not he was with an underager. I would argue, hypothetically, and I don't know if this is true, but there are allegations that Destiny was with someone who was underage. That hypothetically is a more severe crime, depending on the age of that person, etc. I haven't looked into the details, to be honest, but that hypothetically would be more severe of a crime than pointing a gun at a pregnant lady's stomach and not pulling the trigger. I guess we could debate the nuances of being a PDF or someone connected to that versus being an assaulter of women and what would be worse. Nonetheless, it didn't really delve into that because the point we are making from the get-go is we actually should look at the influence that people have and where that's pushing our society in a direction. Where you get confused is you're saying that even though George Floyd was never connected other than just pure happenstance of his death to the terrible things that happened in his name and that he would be interchangeable and they just would have used someone else if not be it for him. We're saying that proves that he wasn't worse for society as opposed to Destiny who's actually saying these things. The equivalent would be this. If I sit here and say, hey, I got a strike on my YouTube channel and some lunatic says, I like Rob Noor, and because he got that strike, I'm going to go and I'm going to vandalize YouTube's studio for that. I don't think that you say I'm bad for society because someone did that even though I never suggested it. Whereas if Marte's saying, I got a strike and therefore someone should go vandalize YouTube's studio and someone does that, we would say that Marte's responsible for that rhetoric and what went there. That's what we're talking about when we question whether or not someone's good for society. So when we're talking about their quote unquote legacy or what they influence people to do, we're talking about a prominent left-wing streamer that is saying that they should have an environment where Republicans are afraid for their lives to go in public, that the worst thing that could have happened was that bullet not taking out Donald Trump versus George Floyd, who didn't say any of this shit about rioting or anything like that. He merely happened to pass away in what you say is a legal action done by Derek Chauvin, which you're admitting that they would have taken any number of incidents like that captured on film in order to justify their rioting anyways.
So, that was nice and emotive.
I'm very good at that.
How much money has Destiny cost taxpayers? How much of a drain on society in real life has Destiny been?
I think so. Let me answer this in two ways. One,
Just answer it one way real quick, just in terms of dollars. Can you quantify that?
I would not know specifically other than to say I know he took a PPP loan, which he ended up not having to pay back, which I would say would be a drain from our coffers. I can't speak to if he took other sorts of things that were financial detriment to society. I don't know. Perhaps he was responsible for getting people elected that significantly hurt our economy. I don't know. And you don't know exactly how much money George Floyd cost.
Hooked on drugs.
What's that?
How many people would you say he personally hooked on drugs?
I have no clue. How would I know?
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
Destiny or
fair.
George
That's
Floyd?
fair. How many homes do you think he broke into?
I don't know. I
Huh.
mean, he
Okay.
did publicly,
So
apparently,
in terms of
allegedly, he
actual
said one time.
damage to-
He
your
allegedly said
entire-
one time that he was arming himself to take care of someone that did a DDS attack on him. I don't know if
your
that's true, but I've heard
entire
those
argument
allegations.
hinges on things that you can't point to.
Okay, how many people did George Floyd?
Hey, just let me. I'll land the plane. And it's your turn, Rob. I promise. Okay. Your entire argument is contingent on what people are talking about or saying online, and what we're saying, or at least what I'm saying, is that in terms of real world damages, by far George Floyd was a worse human being and much worse for society in terms of what people already had to cough up in order to house him, in order to feed him, in order to freaking pay all of his different baby mamas, who, as far as I know, Destiny doesn't have any children that he's not supporting. Maybe he does. I don't really know what the dude's up to. Yeah, but I know that George Floyd did. And I know that George Floyd was personally responsible for a number of abortions because he had different baby mamas testify to that fact. I don't know how many abortions are under Destiny. I don't care to, but I would imagine it's pretty low.
So this was addressed at the beginning of the debate, where we said that as heinous as an individual could be, like someone who beats a woman, they still wouldn't be as bad for society as a politician that leads to negative outcomes due to their corruption, because that politician has the ability to affect millions of people, as opposed to the person. Nonetheless, he's an influencer that has the ability to influence voters that are doing these things. And so we would say that please, you haven't even given me a chance for the plane to take off, talking about landing it. So please give me a chance. So when it comes to that, we can see that rhetoric that people like Destiny push. He is one of the top streamers that's streaming and influencing that tens of thousands on a nightly basis and hundreds of thousands that would see his videos in perpetuity, of young people that if you go to the Reddit, you could see people suggesting that they're possibly prepared to use violence. We could see people actually using this violence more and more against law enforcement officials, against politicians, etc. That's going to be worse than what one drug addict does. And so we already said, when it comes to the individual, like, sort of crimes that these people have committed, what's more important is the societal impact, because Destiny's reaching tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, where George Floyd was only reaching the circle around him. But since you want to ask me specific questions about how many people, things like how many people did Destiny allegedly get hooked on drugs, can you name me the exact number of people that George Floyd got hooked on drugs?
473.
Show me the proof.
You go read Mariam Hanein's book, The Real George Floyd.
Okay, what chapter does it say he hooked 473?
8.
You're full of shit.
I know, I'm fucking with you at this point. I really
of course, that's all you have in the debate.
If you go read the book, she does go into that in a lot of detail.
So, like, yeah, you think it's some sort of gotcha that I can't say whether or not Destiny got someone hooked on drugs. I don't know, but neither do you know how many people.
It's not a gotcha. It's real world proof of the character of the person.
Okay, Balderson. Then I'll ask you. I'll ask you, Balderson. How many people did George Floyd get hooked on drugs?
Well, just quickly, the argument you're making is that Destiny is influential.
That's the question.
There's no the Destiny as a person, nothing without his influence. George Floyd as a person, nothing without his influence.
I'm sorry, you're coughing. I think translating what you're saying, if we don't look at their influence and we just look at their personal actions, then you think George Floyd's worse. There's two things I'll say to that. One, the influence is far more important than the direct actions, as we've been saying this whole debate. But secondly, even if we would accept that we're just looking at their personal actions, we don't have the complete and total list of what Destiny's done. There are, as we speak, alleged court cases that are out there alleging some pretty fucking heinous things, including like some of the things that are being alleged is possible sex trafficking of minors. I'm not saying that happened. Destiny deserves to stay in court. And again, I'm not someone who through this.
That's not being said for real, is it?
Sure
it is. Blowing shit.
No, that's certainly being said.
I mean, is it just some dickhead blowing shit, or is that like a legitimate thing?
Define sex trafficking.
Well, I would say you're either a pimp or trading a sex slave.
No, that's not. Sex trafficking could be that you paid someone for intercourse across state lines. That qualifies as sex trafficking. And so if this person was underage and you say, hey, I'll offer to pay for you.
And you're calling that sex trafficking?
That is what the law says.
How is that fucking worse than holding a gun to a pregnant woman?
That's what the law says. that it's sex trafficking. That's what it says.
That's not a violent crime. Violent crimes are absolutely worse than normal crimes.
Okay,
Can I ask you a question? What's being normalized more right now? The rhetoric by Destiny saying that, hey, this is what's happening. His current case right now, is that normalizing this in society more, or him holding a gun to a pregnant woman's stomach? Which one was more influential on society to continue?
I would say overall the degenerate life.
Oranges things where you're like, I want to measure Destiny's influence on society against George Floyd's person, and George Floyd's influence over society doesn't count. Whether he chose that influence or not is an entirely moot point. The influence weighed against the influence, or the person weighed against the person. You guys got to quit playing this game where you're trying to measure apples against oranges.
No, it's not. I will agree. I agree. If we're just looking, Marte is again making the point that the influence on society is more important than the direct actions. If we're just playing the direct actions game, though, if we're just saying straight line direct action to direct action, I think there's a serious question that you might be able to ask. Would you say, at what age would you say someone having intercourse or getting nude photos from a person is more heinous of a crime as putting a gun at a pregnant woman's stomach but not pulling the trigger? Is there a potential age that you would say, yes, that crime's more heinous when it comes to the underage person?
A prepubescent person, I would imagine.
But like a 13-year-old, you'd say is not worse.
Is that how some kids reach puberty anymore? It's 13. I don't fucking know. It's not something I've put a lot of deep thought into. But if this girl, and I'm going to presume that this is actually just a bullshit smokescreen from you, and that Destiny's not being accused of.
He's not being accused. To my knowledge, he's not.
Minor. It's probably like a 16 or a 17-year-old.
That is the accusation.
I think that having intercourse with somebody that's prepubescent is absolutely horrifying. You're destroying a life, and not only their life, but the life of their children, most likely generationally, through that. That's absolutely horrifying and worse than something that, but do I think that doing that with a girl who, not saying
get a little mealy mouth here,
and and the other person should have been an adult, but is she going to go through a giant emotional trauma because she had sex with somebody that society considers to be too old? No, she's not. Those girls seek that out very often.
No, wait a second.
Here's what I want to do, because we are towards the close. So I'll let you guys go for maybe 3-4 more minutes, and then we'll move into closing statements. Okay, go ahead, Rob.
This is an interesting line of questioning that's sort of running tangential to what we're talking about here, but my goodness, like, it seems like you're pretty mealy-mouthed about saying that about a potential 14-year-old. I think that, like, we could say, like, assault, a violent crime could be like someone punching someone at a bar. That's a violent crime, right? You seem to imply violent crimes are worse than non-violent crimes. So if someone brings a 14 or 15,
they're trying a felony and a misdemeanor, right?
Sure, I do. Yes. Okay. Nonetheless, we're not talking about just the legal standard. We're talking about a moral standard and what's worse for society. And oftentimes someone could bleed down from a felony for doing grotesque actions to a child. And we still say, well, that's not a felony, but it's still more grotesque than someone getting in a bar fight, for example. So I think that you're mischaracterizing the idea that a violent attack or a violent crime is always worse than a non-violent crime. It depends on the nature of that. Nonetheless, let me say, just so we're clear here, for a point for you, no one, to my knowledge, is accusing Destiny of being with a girl that young. I believe the allegations is that this potential person that a lawsuit may be around is someone that was 17, and I don't think that there's anyone that's saying that he definitively knew she wasn't 17. So I think that those are both marks in your favor when it comes to this specific thing. But it is interesting that you struggled so much with that question, because I wasn't trying to be tricky. I was just trying to outline the point. Well, there are certain crimes that we say, although they may not be considered violent in nature, or more heinous than other crimes that we consider to be violent. That's all I was trying to get. You act like it was some sort of crazy fucking gotcha. I was just trying to get a baseline to say that's not always the case.
It wasn't a gotcha. I was just trying to give you an honest answer, and that honest answer includes, when would you consider a girl more responsible for her choices as opposed to less responsible for her choices? Would I blame 8-year-old for doing something stupid in the same way that I would blame a 15-year-old for doing something stupid? At a certain age, I would blame myself more for not being a good parent and letting that child do these bad things. But at some point in time, I expect my kid to make the good choices.
Let's say that George Floyd has a cousin named Jim Floyd, right? And let's say he pointed a gun at 2 pregnant ladies' stomachs, and he sold drugs to 1 more person, and he passed fake bills 1 more time than George Floyd. Is he worse for society than George Floyd?
Okay, you're harping on the gun to the stomach point, but the actual rap sheet is incredibly extensive. So that does incorporate to who the person was. So if you're just going to isolate it to one incident, I don't believe that's fair.
Okay, whatever that rap sheet is, let's say we add 3 more crimes to it of a similar nature for George Floyd's cousin Jim Floyd, right? But he didn't die at the hands of Derek Chauvin and there wasn't riots. Is Jim Floyd worse for society than George Floyd?
Again, we're talking about which part of the propaganda operation. Don't fucking hold your head, buddy.
Why can't you just answer questions?
Yeah, this is crazy.
Just answer the question because it
Again,
seems...
you're
has
trying to
nothing to
conflate
do with the
personal-
actual thing. If we
You got-
change the entire nature of the prompt, then I can prove a point. But
It's
that
not
doesn't-
changing
that's
the
not how
nature
life
of the
works,
prompt.
dude.
Let me explain what I'm doing. It seems that you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. When we're arguing when it comes to
Oh
the
gosh,
societal...
that's rare in a debate.
When it comes
I
to
bet
this...
you're unfamiliar with having
Hold
cake.
on, let him
Now
finish.
listen, it is true as a fat guy, I eat cake, though I managed to keep it out of my mouth during this debate, unlike you and that black phallus in front of your face. You
Hey,
couldn't even
man.
hold out from there.
You
So
are
let's
so
not
obsessed
talk
with
about what's
black
putting
dick,
what in
it's not
people's
even
mouth
funny.
here. Nonetheless, I'll finish my point. What you're trying to conflate here is 2 things. When we argue about societal impacts and we're saying, look, Floyd shouldn't be blamed for people that are rioting, but the things Destiny is saying are germane to what we see political violence that are occurring now. And you're like, yes, but the personal. So we're trying, if you're saying that there are 2 things, the societal effect and the personal, what I'm trying to do is use examples to see which one of those you think are more important to saying what's bad for society. If there was a person that didn't result in riots due to their death, but they committed more felonies in real life, is that person worse for society than George Floyd? It's simple. It's not some gotcha. It's not changing the prompt. That's it. And you're incapable of answering because you've been slippery the entire time. And you're incapable of just truthfully answering something so that the debate can move forward based on the standards that you've set forth.
No, I've been real clear about it the whole time. If this dude did more personal things than George Floyd did, then personally he's worse. If nobody's ever heard of that dude, then his effect on
That's not the
society
question.
is not worse. You guys keep trying to do this apples to oranges thing, thinking that
It's not what
that's
he's doing.
somehow
Oh,
getting you
God.
pointed.
All right,
And I
so
imagine
then-
everybody sees it now.
Just to be clear there, what you just said, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we finally got to it. You were like, personally they would be worse, but as to the question of were they worse for society, no.
No.
Okay, then when we're talking, when you're like, but George Floyd did this, he did all these crazy felonies and Destiny didn't. Who gives a shit? You're already conceding that that's not the metric we should use for what's worse for society.
His legacy to society is worse than Destiny's
Right,
also.
okay, then who gives a
You
shit
lose
about
both
his
parts.
felonies?
Yeah.
Why are we even talking about it?
You lose both parts.
No,
His
we
legacy
don't
to
lose-
society was riots.
No, Benjamin,
and
that's not even the
destruction.
case, bro. No,
What
not even
happened was
close.
Yeah.
this. What happened was
Name me
this.
one cop attacked in
All right,
Destiny's name.
let's put a pin in that little error that's going on. I see what you're saying, Rob, and I don't know how else to translate that over. I'm not sure if I could say it in any other direction, but I do understand what the both of you are saying. I think there's a disconnect in that moment. But I think maybe open panel, somebody else can possibly come on and try to explain a little bit better because I'm not sure how else you could put it. All right, let's go ahead and move into closing statements. Rob, if you'd like to kick us off.
What do we got, 4 minutes, roughly?
Yeah.
All right, whatever. I won't need a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate. I think that what comes down to, you can see there at the end, like all the questions about the personal sort of dalliances, crimes, etc., that these people committed are sort of irrelevant when we're talking. Remember, the exact wording was, is George Floyd worse for society than Destiny? Of course, individuals can be terrible people and go to prison and commit terrible, heinous felonies. But if they're only doing it at a local level to people directly connected to them, we wouldn't necessarily say that they have a broad reach on society or are worse than society than someone who's doing things that are affecting hundreds of thousands of people. In this case, we could see that in their lives, Destiny certainly affects in a negative way more people than George Floyd through his various felonies could have done. And that's without even getting to the alleged crimes of Destiny, right? So instead, we should look at that second scenario. I think that what you saw was our opponents kept trying to divvy back and forth between them because they knew they weren't doing so hot on that second part of what was good for society or what was worse for society, as the prompt says. They are so confused that they're saying things like Derek Chauvin did nothing wrong, and of course George Floyd never advocated for these riots, etc., etc. But we blame George Floyd in the sense that we say he is worse for society if people went out and did negative things in his actions. One, we argue significantly that that's not the case, just like it wouldn't be the case if Ben Carson was killed or if I was or anyone else, and then people went out and committed heinous acts, even though we never inspired them or suggested that we do that. You wouldn't say that we were worse for society because of that. And they really don't have an answer for that. It's just say, yeah, your legacy would be worse. But that's clearly an absurd way to look at it. I think the clearest way we put it is from the book, The Tale of Two Cities. There literally starts the French Revolution because a nameless kid was ran over by a carriage. At least I think that's how it went. And they're like, yes, that nameless kid would in fact be worse for society than someone like Destiny because it inspired a heinous action, which was the French Revolution. That's nonsensical. Furthermore, we go further than that and say, even if we just take the symbolism of what's inspired, the people on the street level are the people that are martyred, their names are martyred, are less damaging for society than the people that are actually out there suggesting that or gaslighting or laying the groundwork for things like these riots occurring. They've conceded that if it not be George Floyd, it would have just been someone else in the summer of 2020 because there would have been another black person that was negatively affected by police. It would have been on camera and they would have used that as an excuse to riot. This shows that if we take George Floyd out of society, we would have had very similar outcomes for society, whereas Destiny's a person who they've conceded is one of the top 5 to 10 most influential Democratic streamers at this point. He's reaching hundreds of thousands of people in real life. We argued how his rhetoric is actually indicative of what the mainstream Democratic views are right now. They do want Republicans to fear for their life. 55% of Democrats say that they would somehow justify the murder of Donald Trump. This directly imitates rhetoric that Destiny had that said the worst thing that could have happened was that bullet missing Donald Trump. They don't have an answer for any of this. They're just like, yeah, but the Floyd riots were bad. The people that were instructing them to riot, and Destiny himself said things like rioting's the other side of the coin to voting. It doesn't matter if I could draw a direct line that someone uniquely took this because they listened to Destiny. Symbolically, these people that are saying this rhetoric that's leading to sort of this violence and this division in society today is worse than what George Floyd is doing to society today, particularly when George Floyd himself never advocated for any of these things occurring. It's clear as day that that's how we would judge this. I mean, I don't even understand further how to go. It's clear that they're confused all over the place, even going as so far as to saying Rodney King was worse for society, but actually no, Rodney King apparently had a good legacy because the police were corrupt, etc., etc. I mean, it's just nonsensical. They're all over the place when it comes to these sorts of things. The last thing I'll say is, we need to look at where this is going to further go. Regardless of this silly debate topic or things like that, I actually had a good time. I'd like to thank both of our opponents and Sarah for being here. I thought it was an enjoyable debate. I really did, and no hard feelings to anyone here. There is a serious conversation that need to be had about sort of how commonplace it is to cheer on violence, to ignore violence, etc., particularly coming from the left that we now see. And I think Destiny is the voice that is the resonating the most out there in the mainstream by people both celebrating it and by people condemning it that we see. He is the focal point for what we see of people saying things like Republicans should be fearful for their life. All Republicans are effing around and finding out if they get killed, making fun of people like Corey Competore, making fun of Erica Kirk, making fun of Charlie Kirk, etc. We see tens of thousands of people that don't have the influence of Destiny that are out there repeating this same sort of nonsense. And we're going to see these violent attacks get worse and worse and become more and more frequent. We see the attacks that are occurring against ICE. We see mainstream politicians repeating some of this very rhetoric that people like Destiny have been having for years, using terms like, you know, you're a fan of that Austrian painter, etc. Something that was basically written on the bullet that took out Charlie Kirk, one of the ones that wasn't shot, but that was there that took out Charlie Kirk. So this is rhetoric that we're going to have to deal with, and it's worse than anything George Floyd, the common thug criminal, did. Lastly, it's interesting, I mean, despite all of this, for them to say Derek Chauvin did nothing wrong, they can't even articulate why the second order of consequence of George Floyd inspiring people wouldn't also mean that Derek Chauvin inspired. They say, okay, yes, but the other police officers, they're like, well, we don't know because we don't know their names. And then the people that did things like train Derek Chauvin. There's no logical point that we wouldn't stop. They just say, well, because they erected statues to George Floyd. Okay, that doesn't mean that George Floyd himself did anything. The legacy of George Floyd is the legacy of Michael Brown. It's the legacy of Trayvon Martin. It's the legacy of who the next person will be when these people like Al Sharpton and these race hucksters that want to cause division and want to divide us by race and want to encourage these sorts of violence, when they inspire for the next person for this to occur. There will always be tragic incidents involving law enforcement of people of any gender, of any race. The truth is, the real people responsible are the people that are intentionally causing this division and laying the groundwork for these sorts of riots riots and things like that to occur. Although the George Floyd riots were heinous and horrible, I think the people that justified them said they were mostly peaceful, while at the same time locking us down and saying that the pandemic was so bad we couldn't leave our homes. But you know what was worse? Racism. So it was okay to go out and leave your homes for that sort of shit, are more at fault than George Floyd himself, who would have been replaced by someone else. I think we clearly win the debate in this matter. Our opponents were game to try it, but they were outclassed in every possible way by Marte and I. But that's not surprising. We all knew that was going to be the case from the get-go. So thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you, Rob. Marte, to you, please.
We have so insert the cases of Tyree Nichols and Philander Castile that happened. How come there was no riots after that? So these people had passed away. We call them martyrs, things like this. So all we're witnessing in this argument is moving from goalpost to goalpost because, we have blacks dying on camera, by police custody. That happens all the time. I think it was just a time and a place for somebody to be the patsy, and that's what's going to happen. So to Rob's point, when we look at the autopsy report, fentanyl was the main cause of his passing away. Why aren't we saying that fentanyl is worse for society than George Floyd? If I was to ask you this, if we was to say fentanyl is bad, you are conceding in this debate, well, George Floyd's worse than fentanyl because of his, well, hold on. So then you're admitting that something that was the cause, and you don't even know what the origin is of this. We're just pointing to a patsy, whereas Destiny, we have the origin. We can point to an exact figure in society who's weaponizing social media, X profiles, YouTube, and everything else, right? Not only this, but he's weaponized an arsenal of influence. George Floyd hasn't done this. Where's the influence for Philander Castile? Where's the influence for everybody else? Matter of fact, the damage for Eric Garner's thing was so small that happened. It wasn't massive citywide scale. So if we think about this, it's like all you're doing is pointing fingers, but you don't have an exact origin for what's causing really massive bad for society. And we've been trying to put our finger on this the whole debate on their side and try and figure this out. Meanwhile, we have the causation and the instigation and the catalyst in front of us by the name of Destiny, Stephen Bunnell, the third or second, whatever his name is. So it's like we have this. We have causation in front of us. We have the words. We can actually have quotes, things like this. We don't have quotes for George Floyd or anything like this. We don't have an active, I would say, a propaganda machine from Floyd himself. Now you could say, yes, he passed away, but that proves my whole point. So Floyd's influence was passive. So it's like, what's stronger? Something that's active as far as a call for violence, or something that's passive, meaning this can go over time. We could say that, but we can't even determine, on the other side, it's like we just had a passing of Charlie Kirk, which he couldn't even condemn this. He never condemned this on Piers Morgan. So to me, I think that if he's amassing a large audience and they're saying this, what Destiny's doing is normalizing death in America. How is he not normalizing death right now? How is George Floyd normalizing death in America right? Oh, he wasn't. He was the guy that passed away. Meanwhile, Destiny's normalizing death by omitting this. He's not even condemning this. When questioned by Andrew Wilson, we can replay the footage right now. And he was weaseling his way, just like you guys, out of this whole conversation because you guys don't have a real point of origin, whereas we do. That's it. You guys are dead in the water. Your argument never moved, and there was no traction on it, actually. And I'm just done. You guys are cooked. On to Steve or whoever else.
Thank you, Marte. Steve, to you, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks, you guys, for, giving us something to laugh at occasionally. It's been pleasurable. And, maybe sometime we'll do it again. I had fun. At any rate, their entire argument is 100% based in stochastic terrorism is the only thing that matters. Nothing else. There's no real world consequences, and that's okay because we delve in the imaginary, and the imaginary is scary. And we don't want to be scared of destiny. We want to be comfortable, and we would like the words that scare us to go away. And there's no acknowledgement whatsoever from either of these clowns about the real world consequences that exist because of George Floyd. You have to remove the crux of the argument from the argument in order to make the argument. And that's their whole game right now, is we have to do little bit, cutesy rhetorical traps. I refuse to acknowledge something that's going to be absurd. They have to do little, okay, if we take away the entire prompt and then create a brand new prompt, then we've got another point. And that's what matters. And the gish galloping that surrounds it is a distractionary device in order to lead people away so you can spike the football right about the 2-yard line. Because you've never actually proven that Destiny has this influence that you've given them. You've talked about numbers. You've talked about tried to insanely somehow link the Charlie Kirk assassination to Destiny, which is, I mean, look, I'm no fan, but that's a pretty heinous allegation, and also pretty wild. You've tried to say that the influence is what matters, and that's the only thing that matters. Well, if the influence is the only thing that matters, then Destiny is as interchangeable as the tens of millions of Black Americans that could be interchanged for George Floyd. So it's not Destiny, the person, that is the issue. It's Destiny, the numbers that people can look at who are just absolute mouth-breathing idiots and go, oh, their numbers there, that must mean they're right. They're popular. I'll go look at that. And then they'll go, oh, that's a bloviating Adderall-ridden idiot. You know, hopefully, God willing. You know, or they'll go, oh my goodness, I need to hear more of this 1,000-mile-an-hour doing the exact same partisan hack grift that Ben Shapiro and freaking the rest of the Daily Wire does. Because they're just mirror images of the same bullshit narrative management operation. And Destiny, the persona, is an interchangeable character, just like George Floyd, the reason that people went to war, is an interchangeable character. There's nothing that distinguishes Destiny from anybody else other than he was elevated to that position, just like the memory of George Floyd was elevated to that position. If we're looking at them as individual people, George Floyd is by far the bigger scumbag. If we're looking at the narrative management operation and the influence campaign that was being ran on both individuals or through both individuals, George Floyd does way more damage in terms of damage to infrastructure, damage to neighborhoods, damage to storefronts, injuries caused, lives lost. George Floyd is by far the bigger scumbag. And I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Steve. Benjamin, to you, please. You're muted.
Can't hear you.
Sorry about that. This was a good time. I appreciate you guys coming and debating. Unlike, and I know the super chats are coming up, but unlike that one super chat said that we put too much energy into it. You know what? Are you not entertained? We put in an honest debate for 4 guys that didn't really, you know what? All 4 of us think that both these people are trash. With that said, our opponents tonight, they spent their entire argument was trying to switch things around, similar to the way the leftists have pinned down racism to where one race can be excluded from the racism thing. So that way all the racism could fit their definition. They tried to do this in this debate also, where they tried to compare the influence Destiny has had on the people as opposed to the person George Floyd was and not his influence. I was fine with arguing either side. Just compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. I do get that George Floyd did not intentionally cause the influence that he had. That has no bearing on the point. It makes no difference. His influence is still his influence, whether he wanted it or not. Other than that, fantastic debate. Would like to do it again about something a little more serious. Had a gas to you guys.
Thank you.
I'm going to hit the restroom real quick, if that's all right.
Sure, take your time.
I broke
Rob.
the seal first. I felt real bad. I was like, damn it.
That's okay. I broke this. I always break the seal, usually around the hour mark. Thank you to all 4 of you. This was actually a very nice debate. I didn't feel the need to really play referee or mom a whole lot, and you guys were able to get through the actual conversation and move through the discussion and talking points very smoothly. So kudos to all of you, and thank you for giving me an easy night. Kokomo drops a big 15 and says, I have to pay for the Wayne's World comment. I will agree. You guys were all killing me. I was crying through the opening statements, absolutely crying. That just, I don't know. You guys win. Great Scott with the big 5. Here you go, Tomato. Thank you kindly, Mr. Great Scott. And of course, this was a perfect win. Unforged EGO sent the big 50 and said 50 suck up points for Rob and Marte. Thank you, Unforced EGO. I think that was the ultimate win. The chat always wins. So, Marte and Rob, you guys automatically have an extra 50 points for the suck up side of things, however that's going to work. But thank you. Lord of the Nerd said, please ask Black D-Face if you didn't have breakfast yesterday, how would you have felt? Personally, I don't see the Black D. It's clearly a fudge pop. Shots fired. Steve just stepped away, so when he comes back, I don't.
That would be a proper size fudge pop because we all know fudge pops is bullshit. That's like a half a fucking bite. You're like, I need to eat 6 of these. That would have been proper.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And Anthony says, paying my tomato tax and showing Rob some love, not one step back. Get him, Rob. Love your content. You're welcome to respond if you want.
Oh, yeah. AJC's awesome. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. I hope everyone enjoyed, even if you thought we lost the debate because you have a head wound or something like that. We still appreciate it, and we hope that you all had fun. We really do.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And a kind reminder again, the link for the backstage is dropped in the YouTube chat. If you want to join the conversation, I've got 2 back there so far, which is kind of odd for debate night. So
they don't want to get wrecked. They know.
But maybe that's the case. Okay, now I got 3 back there. It's just odd. Normally it's just like pop, 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 pop as soon as I drop that link. So maybe they didn't hear me the first time. Texas Bully Mom says, with a big 10, taxes theft, or did we skip that debate?
Texas theft.
Oh, because it's I think I said tomato tax for the goal. So
Oh,
that's
yeah,
fair.
no, taxation is theft every time.
Fair enough.
Every time.
And Just Gerald says, you poors disappoint me. Give Sarah more money. Yes, I gladly accept lots of money, all of your money, or most of your money. I'm very grateful for that. So thank you. Marathon Kev making a little drive-by with the big 50. Sister Sarah. I always love the way he says it. This should be salacious. Thank you, Marathon Kev. Beaningtons says, Destiny's actions erode civil discourse more directly than Floyd's passive role in history. Floyd is irrelevant without BLM. Steve or...
Balderson.
Ben,
Yeah.
I'm assuming this is directed more towards you if you want to respond.
Yeah, and Destiny's influence is as artificial as George Floyd's. So I don't even know what we're talking about really ultimately, because they've both been weaponized in an influence operation. I don't think that there are real world consequences in any way, shape, or form that are remotely close to that from Destiny than what happened with George Floyd.
I think
you just can't make the argument. If Destiny's whole persona is the thing that matters, then Destiny as the person doesn't fucking matter, and you can replace him with absolutely anybody, just like you could with George Floyd.
Yes, but the difference is that there are a far more number of people, because George Floyd was literally just a body that died that could literally be anyone, where Destiny does have some amount of rhetorical ability and talent that causes to influence people. I could give you a great example of this, right? Before Destiny got kicked off Twitch, other than Hassan, he was by far the biggest left-wing political voice on Twitch. Now, you had a bunch of people pretending to be Destiny after he got kicked off. Can you name who the most influential person is? That was just interchangeable with Destiny? Who is it on Twitch?
Pretending to be Destiny?
Yeah, just interchangeable with Destiny. Who was it? Who filled Destiny's shoes on Twitch?
I I don't Twitch, man. I have no idea.
Well, there's no one. It's a bunch of people that are trying to emulate his style, but they weren't as successful as it. Whatever you may think of Destiny as a person or like his political beliefs, etc., he is someone that's entertaining and gets a lot of eyeballs, and he's a competent debater who there are people that are drawn to him because of that. So although you're right that they could astroturf someone else, like, you know, a Parker or a Dean Withers or something like that, to theoretically fill Destiny's shoes, it's not as simple as just having another one of, you know, a black person that has a violent interaction with law enforcement. What you should have said, what the topic should have said to benefit you guys too, is what happened to George Floyd worse for society than Destiny? But George Floyd, the person, is nothing. He did nothing. Like the user said, he was passive.
Yep.
So it's not interchangeable.
Individual to individual, he's a scumbag. If it's influence to influence, George Floyd is still the bigger scumbag. Like there's you have to make it very narrowly, but still somehow not totally getting the point argument in order to make your argument. But if we go person to person, George Floyd is far worse. If we go influence to influence, George Floyd is far worse.
That's not.
And I got a couple questions here, Rob. I got a couple questions.
Sure.
Did the DNC give Destiny money in order to help his operation?
I don't know. He was part of Progressive Victory PAC for a time, I believe, but I don't know if he received monies from them, nor do I know if he directly received money from the DNC.
Was he
Get a drink,
receiving
man.
money?
Yeah, right.
Was he receiving money from the left wing?
Like I said, I think Progressive Victory PAC, I believe he worked with them. I assume he didn't do it for free. I'm unaware of what the exact monies were, but sure.
So now, secondly, do you think that these institutions that are left wing that are giving him money are also not pushing him?
No, I would say that he's definitely being pushed by certain platforms. Sure.
So there could be other influencers and are that say the same things that he does.
Who? Name one.
But they chose their pony, and now they're putting their pony.
Name
out
one.
there.
Name the
That's all
influencer. Go ahead. Name the influencer that says what. Name the influencer that said the worst thing you could have was the bullet.
One who is taking the exact same money from the
Who?
exact same. Hassan Piker.
Okay, Hassan is actually at odds with Destiny on a great many of things.
Sure.
He's approaching things through more of the progressive pro-Palestine
Yeah.
side. Destiny's
Yeah.
approaching it more from the pro-Israel sort of like establishmentarian Democrat side.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, who
And
else
they're
is
all
saying?
getting funded by the same.
Okay,
people.
let's assume that's true. I could name a lot of people that were getting funded by the exact same organization as Destiny who don't have 1/100th of the reach of him. And what's the point you're trying to make here? I don't understand.
Well, your question was who's more influential, and I answered. So now you just dance.
I don't know. First off,
I mean, cardio's good.
the question was directed at me from Balderson, right? And so that's why I'm referencing this specifically. I asked you previously on Twitch who came in, and your answer seems to be, well, he got money from Progressive Victory. Cool. That's irrelevant to the conversation. So did a lot of other streamers that don't have near any of the reach.
Like 8 months ago.
What's that?
But he got the U.S. money too.
He got the PPP loan? Is that what you're referencing?
USAID.
I don't know. Show me. You're making the allegation. Show me.
No, that's what I'm saying. I thought that was something that came out like 6-8 months ago.
I didn't see that. That could be the case. Nonetheless, is the claim that you're trying to make here that Destiny wouldn't be anywhere where he was except in the 2024 election? He received money from Progressive Victory PAC?
No. I'm saying he's been propped up for a better part of a decade, if not the full decade.
Okay, by who?
I'm saying he's an artificial creation.
Okay, by who?
Well, for a start, National Endowment for Democracy.
Okay, Ned, did they push anyone else?
Certainly.
Who?
To varying degrees. Definitely pushed the Young Turks. They definitely pushed Kyle Kalinski's show. They definitely
So just to be clear, all of those people are totally interchangeable. None of them have any talent whatsoever. None of them are influential whatsoever. It's just national endowment.
Not
the argument, it's a nonsensical
Have you ever heard of Hollywood, Rob?
I have heard of Hollywood, right? It's a nonsensical argument. The point that you're trying to make is this. A passive person like George Floyd that was just a career criminal being killed, and what you're admitting would have literally been interchangeable with literally dozens of other people that also could have been passive and just victims of police violence. Like, that's as interchangeable as one of the top 5 streamers in the world from the Democratic position. It's a joke. Everyone watching can see it's a fucking joke.
Yeah.
All right, let's
That's
go ahead and move on. Our panel is waiting for us backstage. Naomi sends the big five to say love to the Tomato Queen. Love you too, Naomi. Horses in the chat for our darling Naomi Mod. Wicked Wally says it's the effect of a corrupt official versus an institution. Officials are corrupt for their terms. Institutions are corrupt in perpetuity without
Perpetuity.
thank you. Perpetuity without form.
reform.
Reform.
You're muted, Ben.
I don't know if he was talking. We can't see. The mic's blocking his face.
I was talking. There's no mic in front of my face. It's an interesting thing because what you're saying, and I agree, because you see all kinds of people when they get out of the position that they were in, personally then talk about their disagreements and some of the things that they saw in the system as bad. And one of the first things a rational person would think is, well, why didn't they say something while they were in the position? But the position comes with certain expectations that it's almost like when you get caught in a path of snow where somebody else kind of veered off too far to the left. And if you get caught in their path, you're all of a sudden veering to the left also. These positions that have been built have certain expectations and things that you have got to walk through. And they might not agree with that as a person, but it's what the position demands. And so, like on the farm, I have things like that all the time. Because I'm the head of my farm, I have to do fucking things that I hate. Like I had a goat that her leg went foul. You could smell death on her. And she's sitting there alive, and I don't want to go over there and fucking shoot her, but she's going to die either way. So I can either let her go or go necrotic and die horribly, or I can be a fucking man and be the guy who runs this farm and go do what I got to do and not bitch up, but the position sometimes does not equal what you want personally.
I'm not saying your answer was nonsensical in answering this point. I just don't understand what this point, who I love Wally. Wally's the man. I don't understand what the point has to do with the debate. Sure, you could have corrupt individual officials and also a corrupt institution. Both of those could be true. Is trying to compare like George Floyd to the corrupt official where Destiny represents a corrupt institution.
I don't think that had anything to do with it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't know what it's but okay. I'm just making the point. I don't understand what that has to do with the debate.
That's fair.
Well, I would argue that Floyd would more represent the corrupt institution and Destiny, the individual.
No, I disagree completely.
Yeah,
me too.
All right. Dusty says, which race/ethnicity is the worst for society, though? Y'all pussies don't want to ask the hard questions.
We like having channels that don't have our TOS violations.
It's true.
Pussy's not.
It's true.
I believe you're looking for like the Nameums, their channel. You can find them.
I'm not gonna do that on Sarah's channel.
Right.
But you can find me on Rumble Monday through Thursday.
There you go. All right.
And 10 a.m.
Tom Carpenter says, I'm going to watch football. Sorry, Sarah, this one's just got too much energy for such a topic. Can't stop laughing at how passionate people are getting about an argument like this. Riots equal bad, destiny equal bad. Enough for me. If only it were that simple.
Well, let me say this, Tom Carpenter. Thank you so much for your $20. We don't really give a fuck about your opinion, but we'll take your money. You can send in another 50 to bitch about it. How about that?
Fair
Are
enough.
you not entertained?
Powder Dusty says, stop being broke, chat. Yes. Again, send your moolah. How long, Nate, who is backstage? Balderson, it's good to see you. Rob doesn't even care about tonight, but he walked you to the butcher like a Judas goat.
And you just brought up a goat too. So yes, it rings true. It rings true. Yeah.
A question for Rob. Why do you think only the left has ever acted
I was
violently?
the butcher, bro.
Dusty got booted from my channel today for falsely claiming a short of me said that the left acts with violence, which is untrue. I've never made that claim. So it's sort of a callback to a conversation he had with me this morning. No, I've never said that only the left acts with violence. They're disproportionately doing so now, but they're not the only ones.
Fair enough. Evan Lord says, congratulations on the Floyd earning his nickel for Narcotics Anonymous. Also, bring up / protect Flow State for an open panel dumpster fire. He is backstage and he is queued up in line, so I will add a $10 credit to his name. Dusty says, Marte, this isn't a photo shoot. You have to do more than sit there breathing up all our air. You're welcome to respond.
Well, here's the thing, though. He gets destroyed every time I'm on these panels anyway. So, I mean, bring him up. I'm ready for this guy, too, to get destroyed. So, yeah.
Fair enough.
Sun Tzu, when your opponent's defeating themselves, you don't interfere, right?
That's true. Yeah, true.
I know
Rumble,
that's why we let you get like as many words as the whole rest of the panel in.
I'm the only one saying anything intelligible when it comes to us three. Marte's just like, yeah, Rob knocked it out of the park.
Only people that listen to
it would be
True
called
Sport
the Gish
understood
Gallop.
half of what you said.
Gish Gallop. You guys sound like Destiny now.
Oh, goodness. From Rumble, Werbs sent the Big Ten to say they just lied about the length of the Rodney King video. He said the last 20 minutes where they beat him when the total video length was only
9:37,
10 minutes long.
They were scant on specific details on much of this.
That was specifically at me. And no, I did anybody expect me to fucking off the top of my head, just like Rob said? It was a long ass time ago. I was throwing it out there that it was a very long time. Also, 10 minutes getting beat up by cops. Pretty fucking horrible. I don't know if you've been beat up by cops or hit with a billy club. It's not great.
Balderson, finally, you say something that the whole panel could agree on. No one expected much of you, and you delivered. So,
Dusty says, question for the panel: which has the most closeted feelings for Destiny, and why is it Rob?
Dusty, little butthurt about the wrecking you got this morning, huh? Hey, I'm more than happy for you to keep sending money, Sarah, to like let your feelings about me be known. Maybe you'll come on this panel and get wrecked again, and it'll lead to more money going to Sarah. I'm all for it. So
He is sitting
Yeah,
back.
He's kind of sour on Destiny now, so he needs somebody else to take that place.
who, me?
Come on up.
Yes, is that it?
looking for
Happily married. Thank you.
Fair
The
enough.
transference must
I
occur.
didn't say anything about you not being married.
And Dusty says, I became a corn star because of Marte. Marte's such the influencer.
Now watch
I mean,
out,
that's a good
Dusty.
point.
Dusty told me today. Watch out, Marte. He used to be a proud boy. Whoa, he got in fights. So watch out,
man,
Marte.
Gavin McGinnis?
Whoa.
I'm so scared
Now
of
he
Gavin
doesn't
Mc-
like them because I mean, Marte might as well have said I used to be cool, or Dusty might as well say I used to be cool. I don't know why you'd brag about used to be cool and now being a little bitch about it, but just tell you watch yourself, Marte.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you could like beat him in any kind of a fight. Like Marte's a beast. But the other thing I gotta say is nobody could catch that guy in like a greased pig contest. I mean, oily as fuck. Like nobody's getting a hold of that shit.
Listen up. I mean, you look like the guy from Deliverance with that alopecia right now, with the squeal like a pig thing right now. I could go on a little diatribe about that, but I don't want to. Let's continue.
Balderson must be a good guy. That cat seems to like him. Animals have a good taste in people, so I'll give Balderson that. The kitten seems cool, so.
And Tom Carpenter sends the Big Ten to say, debate topic, meh. Happy wife comment, legendary.
That was a great joke. I got to give it up. That was great.